Chapter 136. Matt Damon, Leonardo DiCaprio. A long list of movie names floated through his mind. Eric shook his head and threw the flying images into the corner. He continued to read as if nothing had happened. Other than these two superstars from his previous life, he did not see any other familiar faces. Of course, the original Chris O'Donnell had also been blown away by the flapping of butterfly wings. Of course, even if he appeared, Eric would not give the role to Chris, because his presence in the original version was too weak. Although Al Pacino's performance was too eye-catching, his own performance was not outstanding. After quickly reading through the 30 files, Eric asked Martin Brest for a pen and made a tick behind the names of Matt Damon and Xiao Li. After hesitating for a while, Eric finally decided to choose Matt Damon. Matt Damon had just turned 18 this year. He had a sunny and handsome appearance, which was exactly the same as Charlie's image. In comparison, Xiao Li's current image was a bit more roguish. After drawing a circle around Matt Damon's name, Eric said to Martin Brest, who had been watching his actions, "Martin, give the role of Charlie Simmons to Matt Damon. As for Leonardo DiCaprio, give him the role of Charlie's classmate, George. Also, I don't care if they have an agency or an agent now. If they want to get the role, they have to join UTA. Eric, what if they don't agree to join UTA?" Eric looked at Martin strangely. What right do they have to disagree? Martin heard Eric's matter-of-fact tone and was slightly stunned. He recalled the information about Matt Damon and Xiao Li and quickly laughed. Indeed, the two rookies have no reason to refuse. So, in just a few words, the two roles were decided. Both Island Horror and Knowing a Woman by Smelling Fragrance were Firefly's film projects. The two crews also had contact with each other, so Martin Brest already knew about Eric's process of choosing the roles in Island Horror. He and Jonathan Demme felt the same way. They both thought that Eric just wanted to show his dominance of the movie, so he took the final decision for the roles. Although Martin felt that Eric's actions were a bit careless and childish, he did not refute anything. In the eyes of Martin, who was almost 40 years old, Eric was indeed just a child. It was understandable for him to do such a thing. What he and Al could do was to carefully screen the suitable candidates. No matter who Eric chose, they could guarantee that the other party would be competent for the role. Eric had no intention of defending himself. His reason for doing so was just as Martin and the others thought. If he was a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s, he might be able to show his magnanimity by delegating power and gain more admiration. But he was only 18 years old now. If he did that, people would think that he was young and easy to fool. So, he had to show his strength everywhere. It was the same for movies and women. It took 40 minutes to travel from the studio in Colombia to Malibu. Eric quickly circled the list of all the actors. Part of it was based on Martin's advice, and the other part was based on his impression of some of the actors in his mind. Martin's car stopped at an intersection on the coastal road in Malibu. Eric put on his sunglasses and baseball cap and got out of the car. "Thank you for driving me here, Martin. Goodbye." "Goodbye." Martin rolled down the window and winked at Eric. He waved his hand and asked his assistant to drive away. After the Passat turned around and left, Eric turned around and walked to the small villa not far away. When he arrived at Virginia's house, Eric took out a key to open the door and walked in. It was already evening, and the lights in the villa were already on. When Eric walked to the door opened from the inside. Virginia was wearing casual home clothes and carrying two big bags in front of Eric. When Virginia saw Eric suddenly appear in front of her, she was obviously shocked. The bags in her hands fell to the ground. "Eric, why are you here?" The woman hurriedly picked up the garbage bags on the ground and put them next to the door. She opened the door a little to let Eric in. Eric smiled and hugged the woman. He kissed Virginia's face and said, "Why are you so nervous? Don't tell me you're hiding a man at home? I just didn't expect you to come to my place these days." Virginia rolled her eyes gently. "Even if I'm hiding a man, what can you do to me?" Eric pinched Virginia's face and said seriously, "Well, there are many ways to punish women. In some countries in the Middle East, women will be stoned to death. Everyone will work together to stone the woman to death. In the East, there is a kind of pig cage in ancient times. The woman will be stripped naked and put into a big cage. Then, she will be thrown into a pond to drown. How can there be such a barbaric thing? Virginia shuddered. That's why I like the way some places punish women in India. It's very humane. Oh, Virginia said, giving him a curious look. Eric smirked. In some places in India, if a woman is found, the village chief will gather all the strong men in the village and serve the woman one by one. It's guaranteed that the woman will not think about men for the rest of her life. Wow, that's disgusting. Strong men. You're only 18 years old. Where did you learn so much nonsense? I can't help it. I'm born so knowledgeable. Eric spread his hands and said honestly, Then, Mr. Erudite, do you have a way to punish a man who betrays his girlfriend? Tell me the cruelest way to punish him? Eric choked. He coughed and said, I really don't have that. Essay. Virginia rolled her eyes and struggled out of Eric's arms. Stop talking nonsense. You go in first. I'll throw away the garbage. Let me do it. It looks quite heavy. Eric grabbed the plastic bag. He did not know what was inside, but it was indeed very heavy. Just throw it in the trash can at the door. Virginia saw that Eric had already grabbed the bag and did not stop him. She pointed at the door. Eric threw away the garbage and returned to the house. He saw Virginia's figure busy in the kitchen. He walked in and hugged the woman from behind. He looked at Virginia adding sugar and milk powder into the coffee cup. Actually, I don't really like coffee. I'd rather drink plain water. I heard that drinking plain water is one of the secrets to longevity. Virginia smiled and continued to add coffee powder into the cup. You're so young. Why are you thinking about longevity? Are you afraid of death? Of course not. I'm not afraid of death. I'm only afraid of regret. Regret? What regret? Yes, what regret? Eric rested his chin on the woman's shoulder and thought for a while. His regret in his previous life was not being able to see his child grow up, and in the end, not being able to film his own movie. At the time of his rebirth, the film industry in China was in a period of explosion. Although he was almost 40 years old, he still did not completely give up. He also discussed with a few friends that the film industry was so good. Maybe he could spend a few years to come up with a good script and use the connections he had accumulated over the years to get an investment to make his own movie. Unfortunately, before the plan could be implemented, he inexplicably came to this time and space. Now, it was less than a year. His achievements in his previous life were enough to make him a super winner in life. It would be too pretentious to talk about regrets. Why are you suddenly not talking? The woman turned her head and asked as she carefully poured the boiled water into the coffee cup. Nothing. I'm just thinking about what regrets I'll have if I suddenly die now. Virginia put down the kettle and turned around to look at Eric's face. Eric, if you've been thinking about death recently, I suggest you find a psychiatrist as soon as possible. Are you under too much pressure? Of course not. Eric saw the deep worry in the woman's eyes. He hurriedly denied. He wanted to explain, but did not know where to start. Let's talk in the living room. Virginia handed a cup of coffee to Eric and picked up her own cup. The two of them walked to the living room together. After sitting down on the sofa, Virginia asked, Why are you here today? Don't you live with Jennifer Aniston? Eric smiled bitterly. After what happened, it would be strange if Jennifer would be like that. She's renting her own place in Burbank. If it weren't for the accidental fall from the stairs, Eric would have a headache trying to persuade Jennifer Aniston to come back. That morning, when he woke up from his coma, Eric took advantage of the opportunity when Jennifer Aniston was weak from worry and sleepiness. He successfully tricked Jennifer Aniston into joining the cast of Friends. But he made another big mistake. Seeing that the two girls were so sleepy that their heads kept nodding, he put Jennifer Aniston and Drew to sleep on either side of him. At noon, he had lunch with Jeffrey and Kapoor. When he returned to the ward, he found that the two girls were awake. and the scene was quite chaotic. Pillows and blankets were kicked all over the floor, and a scaffold for a drip was pushed over. The two girls were like two crazy wild cats, twisting together. Their clothes were messy, and they were arguing and pushing each other, trying to drive each other off. It was as if it wasn't a piece of paper, but Eric himself. Eric coaxed the two darling girls. Then, Jennifer Aniston wiped her tears and blamed Eric for being biased. Drew persuaded Jennifer Aniston to break up with him, saying that it was better to be quick and painful. After a series of arguments, Jennifer Aniston became rebellious. Jennifer Aniston swore in public that she would never let Drew off so easily. When Eric saw Jennifer Aniston swearing, he was secretly happy. But Jennifer Aniston didn't stay in the villa. Instead, she rented an apartment in Burbank. Although she didn't mention anything about breaking up, she had a cold war with Eric. Then, the filming of Dark War started. Eric was so busy that he didn't have time to coax the girl. He could only make a few harassment calls to Jennifer Aniston every day to announce his presence. Hearing Eric's explanation, Virginia blushed. "You should spend more time with her. She'll be fine if you coax her more. You don't have to be so strong all the time." "Okay, let's not talk about this headache for now. Aren't you going to the UK the day after tomorrow? I have to come and see you. I've talked to Jonathan. As long as Scary Island is completed before September, it won't affect the Venice Film Festival. So, he will strive for perfection during filming. You'll probably stay in the UK for a long time." Virginia took a sip of coffee and blinked. "Will you come to the set to visit?" Eric shook his head. "I'm not sure. Dark War will be released in July. If the filming goes well, I'll go to the UK in mid-May. If it doesn't go well, I probably won't be able to go." "Oh." Virginia nodded non-committally. After chatting for a while, Eric patted his stomach. "Vicky, I'm hungry." The woman quickly stood up. "What do you want to eat? Can I drive to the supermarket?" Eric stopped the woman. "Don't bother. Just make something." "Okay, there's spaghetti at home," the woman said and walked to the kitchen. After Virginia busied herself in the kitchen with an apron, Eric got up and walked to the second floor. When he came to the balcony, the sun had completely set and the sky was getting dark. Eric leaned on the balcony railing and looked at the tip of Malibu not far away. Because of the sky, he could only see a dim outline. The construction had already started and was expected to be completed by the end of the year. In addition to the supermansion with a sea view in Iron Man, several other villas would be built on the more than 1-hectare estate to entertain guests or hold banquets. Eric had seen the complete design draft of the entire manor. As the other villas were located on a flat terrain, their cost was far lower than that of the mansions with a sea view. However, in the design draft provided by Frank Gehry, the few buildings were naturally integrated together. Together with the green belt, tennis court, parking apron, and other facilities in the manor, it gave off a natural feeling. Of course, correspondingly, the cost of the entire estate was more than $20 million. Anyway, there was a professional accounting firm to supervise the financial situation of the project. Since they had decided to build an ideal luxury estate, as long as the other party did not embezzle the construction funds or other tricks, they could be as extravagant as they wanted. After all, the purpose of making money was to spend it. After dinner, although Eric was very tired, he patiently accompanied the woman on the sofa to watch soap operas for a while. "Eric, I heard that Firefly is planning to film a TV series?" "Yeah," Eric said. "All right, this is a sitcom. In the future, many big stars will be needed to make cameo appearances. Do you want to come?" Virginia nodded gently and said, "If you want me to go, I'll go." Eric said, "Jenny is one of the main characters." Virginia laughed. Then I'll go too. You're in charge of coordinating everything. Anyway, it's all your fault. I want to see if you'll do anything if your girlfriend can't help but bully me in public." "I don't care," Eric said with a smile. "According to the ancient traditions of the East, your identity is that of a servant girl. It's natural for you to be bullied by the wife. Of course, if you have the ability to turn the tables on the servant girl, I would be happy to see it happen." Although Virginia did not understand what a servant girl was, it did not prevent her from understanding the meaning of Eric's words. She gently bit Eric's arm, leaving a series of faint teeth marks. "You're really a bastard." Eric got up at 7 o'clock the next day, feeling refreshed. He hurriedly ate breakfast and asked Virginia to drive him to the set. Although it had been a night, Cruz and Hanks quickly found their groove after they started filming the scenes that they did not finish yesterday. The remaining scenes were all completed in half an hour. Joe Pacey, who heard the bad news that he had missed out on Home Alone yesterday, also made a dazzling appearance. When he heard that Sean had let Andy go, he shook his head excitedly, almost like the image in his memory. Moreover, Joe Pacey's voice was more hilarious than Huang Chifa's in the original version. The crew members on the scene could not help but laugh. Hanks also clearly expressed his worry that he might be overshadowed. For the next period of time, the filming of Dark War was still slowly progressing according to plan. A few days later, the crew of Shark Island set off for the UK. Except for the actors, the crew of Shark Island was basically established by Jonathan Demme alone. Eric did not intervene. After all, Jonathan Demme had been in Hollywood for more than 10 years and had more connections in this area than Eric. Eric did not take the time to send them off. Instead, Jeffrey, as one of the producers, followed the crew to the island in the English Channel and stayed with the crew for a few days before returning. In mid-April, Knowing Women by Scent officially started shooting. At the same time, after more than 10 days of filming, Dark War completed all the indoor scenes and began the most difficult outdoor scenes. Although all the scenes were installed in Eric's mind, when it came to the actual shooting, he found that it was not as easy as he imagined. Chapter 137. In the downtown area of Los Angeles, a 500-meter-long street near the Santa Monica Freeway had been sealed off. No external vehicles were allowed to enter. Since 8 o'clock in the morning, a large number of filming equipment had been unloaded from trucks. The nearby residents were used to the film crew's arrival. This was Los Angeles, and there were countless film crews shooting every day. Because this street was not too busy, but it was between high-rise buildings, many film crews would shoot here. But this time, there were obviously more onlookers, not only because the film included two famous stars, Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks, but also because of the director, Eric. Many people had seen living directors before, but a young director who had achieved great success before the age of 19 was rare, so it was not surprising that people were curious about him. There were many paparazzi with cameras in the crowd, hoping to take some valuable photos. Even if they couldn't get some breaking news like an accident, it would be worth waiting for a day if they could get a few close-up shots of the lead actors. "Are the extras in place?" Next to the 3 yellow taxis, Eric asked his assistant as he watched the film crew install cameras on the front of the taxis. 50 people, all here. Royce asked me to ask you, do you want to start preparing? According to the plan, let the extras familiarize themselves with their positions first. We'll shoot some street scenes later. Okay, Alan replied, then said, by the way, the people from the community agency said that we have to open this street for an hour at noon. The reason they gave is that there will be a lot of traffic at that time, so they need to pass through this street. Eric rubbed his forehead in distress. This was purely asking for trouble. It was not the time to get off work at noon. How much more traffic could there be? But he did not want to deal too much with these troublesome agencies. Anyway, the crew needed to eat at noon. Tell them that no problem. We'll stop filming from 12 to 1 o'clock at noon and let the street out. After Alan left, Eric turned his attention to the taxis. The license plates of the 3 taxis were exactly the same. This was just to prevent these details from appearing in the shot. Once the shooting was completed, the 3 cars would change back to their original license plates. Of the 3 cars, one didn't need any special treatment. The cameraman would shoot from the front passenger seat, while the other 2 had cameras installed on the hood of the front and the windows on both sides of the back seat. Today, they were going to shoot the scene where Sean tried to drive Andy to the police station for the first time. In the script, this scene was less than 2 minutes long, but according to Eric's calculations, they would have accumulated nearly an hour of footage. Therefore, if they could finish shooting this scene today, it would be considered a success. After all the camera mounts in the taxi were ready, Eric picked up the walkie-talkie and began to give orders to the whole crew. Cruz and Hanks, who had been staying in the trailer, got out of the car at this time. The paparazzi, who had been waiting nearby for a long time, began to press the shutter crazily. The two men's costumes were not too special. Cruz was in a black casual suit, while Hanks was dressed like a courier, wearing a cap and a plain white work suit. After a brief reminder from Eric, the two men got into the first taxi that was not modified at all. The first scene was to shoot an outdoor scene of the taxi driving on the street. Eric walked behind the wireless monitor and looked at the screen that was less than 7 inches long. After making sure that the light was correct, Eric confirmed with the camera again, "Alan, have the onlookers left the shooting area?" "They've all left. Now, in front of the cameras are our actors." Alan's voice sounded from the walkie-talkie, mixed with the sound of electric current. Eric had to confirm again. If a face that did not belong to an actor appeared on the screen after the production was completed in the future, it would be very interesting. American extras were also actors, and they were very expensive. However, Eric still could not film the real people. Not to mention whether the real passers-by would cooperate with the camera lens. Even if they did, once the movie was completed in the future and people found that they appeared on the screen with the character of Americans, they would not have a sense of vanity like, "I'm in a movie." They would only contact their own lawyers and sue the film crew on the grounds that their portrait rights were infringed. If they pursued the matter, it would be a light compensation of $1 million or $800,000. In the worst case, the movie might be forced to stop in the middle of its release. Therefore, although Eric had confirmed it here, after the post-production editing was completed, he would organize the personnel to conduct a detailed screening of the identities of the characters that appeared in the shot to ensure that there were no outsiders who did not belong to the actors in the movie. Therefore, when you saw a Hollywood movie where the protagonist was walking through the streets with people shuttling back and forth, there was no doubt that even if there were hundreds of thousands of pedestrians in the shot, they would definitely be actors. There would not be any real passers-by. After Hanks drove the taxi to familiarize himself with the road several times, Eric gave the order, and the day's tedious shooting officially began. Eric's eyes were fixed on the monitor, watching the performance of the two people in the car. Their conversation rang out in his earphones. Although it was not very clear, it was enough to hear clearly. This part would definitely be redubbed in the post-production, but the original sound of the movie also had to be preserved as a reference for the dubbing. It was already afternoon, and Eric couldn't remember how many times he had repeated the shoot. In any case, there were a lot of NGs. At this moment, Eric was standing. The staff deliberately raised the monitor to a position in front of Eric's eyes. Although he felt a little tired, Eric had to continue. Cruz and Hanks had plenty of time to rest. After every hour of shooting, the two of them would take a break. In the camera, the two of them were still in high spirits, without the slightest hint of fatigue. However, while they were resting, Eric had no choice but to arrange other scenes. He had only agreed to shoot today with the community agency, so he had to accumulate enough material for many scenes, in case something went wrong in the later stages and they had to make up for it. In the camera, Andy slowly pulled down the zipper of his jacket, took out his pistol, and asked casually, "Where are we going?" "The nearest police station." Sean glanced at the rearview mirror and calmly watched Andy slowly screw on the silencer. Andy looked out the window and smiled. "You're alone?" Sean shrugged indifferently. "Enough. You don't have a gun. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" "Shoot me." Sean turned his head and glanced at him. "The car will flip over." "Yes, it's very dangerous." Andy's relaxed smile did not change at all. He slowly rolled down the window. "If you can get me to the police station, you win." A pistol with a silencer stuck out of the window, and Andy pulled the trigger without hesitation. At this point, Eric called for the taxi to stop. The taxi stopped, and Cruz and Hanks got out at the same time. Nickel, who was in the passenger seat, also came out with a camera. After the three of them left the taxi, the crew quickly stepped forward and drove the taxi back to its original position. Many of the prop vehicles on the road also turned around and returned to the starting point in an orderly manner, waiting for the next shoot to begin. Eric told the three of them about the flaws in the shot just now and told them what to pay attention to during the next shoot. After everything was restored to its original position, Cruise and Hanks returned to the taxi, and Nickel, carrying the camera, followed them in again. Soon, another round of filming began. Dark War was a movie without much depth. It was a 72-hour battle between a police officer and a robber. When promoting the movie, they would definitely use phrases such as ups and downs. In the eyes of ordinary audiences, this was indeed the case. But for Eric, compared to the brain-burning blockbusters in his memory, this movie did not require any thinking. It was just a cool commercial film. Therefore, the acting requirements for the two leading actors were not too high. In particular, the outdoor scenes of this movie did not require much acting skills. With Cruise and Hanks' abilities, they could easily handle it. From mid-April to mid-May, the crew spent most of their time in the streets and alleys of downtown Los Angeles. Sometimes they stayed on a street for 2 or 3 days, and sometimes they finished all the shots in half a day. All in all, the process could only be described as boring. Jeffrey followed the crew of Island Horror to the UK for a few days, then returned to Los Angeles and quickly flew to the New York crew of Smelling Women. The rest of the Firefly employees, except for the security guards at the company's headquarters and a few clerks who were in charge of sending and receiving emails, were working with Eric's crew. If the profits from Firefly's movies were ignored, this film company was no different from many small independent film companies in Los Angeles. Although the exterior shooting of Dark War was very tedious, there were not many problems so far. The shooting progress was basically the same as the previously set shooting schedule. It was expected to officially wrap up around May 15th. Columbia had already started a small-scale promotion, and there were scattered news about Dark War in the media from time to time. Columbia's market value had increased to $3.5 billion because of the negotiations with the wealthy Sony. The Japanese could only see Columbia's share prices rising day by day, and they could not do anything about it. This was a multi-billion-dollar acquisition, and it would take at least a year to complete. The media estimated that even if all the negotiations were completed, the earliest they could sign the contract was September. Even if the acquisition agreement was signed, the subsequent handover would take a few years. Therefore, the summer box office results were the last opportunity for Columbia to push up their share prices. Warner originally had 2 big productions to release, Batman and Lethal Weapon 2, but because Dark Warfare was scheduled to be released on July 7th, Warner had to postpone Lethal Weapon 2, which was originally scheduled to be released in July, to the end of the year. The first Lethal Weapon grossed more than $60 million in 1987, and it was considered a hit. This year, the cost of the second Lethal Weapon doubled. To recoup the cost, the box office sales had to reach at least $100 million. Under such pressure, the Warner executives did not want to compete with Dark War, which had 3 big names, Eric, Cruise, and Hanks. They took the initiative to postpone the release to the end of the year. As a result, Columbia became the only movie giant with 2 blockbuster releases scheduled for the summer. The other blockbuster was Ghostbusters 2, which was also a sequel that movie fans had been looking forward to for a long time. The first Ghostbusters was released in 1984, which was 5 years ago. As for why Columbia suddenly started this project at the beginning of this year, the filming progress was almost the same as Dark War. Their purpose was self-evident. After all, Columbia only had one movie series that was good enough to show off. Eric, do you need to recruit more people? In late April, Jeffrey returned to Los Angeles after completing his inspection of the 2 film sets. They met for the first time in half a month at Firefly's conference room. The time was 8 p.m. During the day, Eric did not have time to come to the office. At this time, Eric was looking at the documents for Smell the Scent and Island Horror that Jeffrey had brought back. Without looking up, he said, "No need. After Smell the Scent of a Woman and Island Horror are completed, I will ask Jonathan and Martin to recommend some crew members to join Firefly." "Well then, what about the TV series? You mentioned that, Friends, time is getting tight. The executives of Fox also contacted me, hoping that you can provide the script. They are willing to help with the pre-production. Eric smiled. He had already made it clear to Barry Diller that Friends would be produced independently by Firefly. Fox still did not give up the idea of getting involved. This was understandable. After all, this was a sitcom. The production cost was very low. If they could co-own the copyright with Firefly, and if the TV series was successful, Fox could prevent Eric from using it as a bargaining chip. Even if it failed, it would only be a few $1 million of investment, which was nothing to Fox. Reject them. You see, they came to you instead of me. This means that Fox knows my character. Jeffrey hesitated for a moment and said, Eric, you are not doing well. Eric finally looked up. Huh? You are too independent in everything you do. You don't allow others to interfere with your movies, and you also don't allow TV series. This will not work in Hollywood. Many low-budget movies nowadays will attract many investors to share the risks and profits. This is the orthodox survival rule of Hollywood. Even among the 6 major movie companies, although the competition is fierce, there are still cross-shareholdings among each other. I understand what you are trying to say. Eric scratched his head. It's just, maybe now is not the time. I will definitely share it with others in the future. While I can still enjoy it alone, I will share it with them a few more times. When others can't take it anymore, I will share some with them. Jeffrey showed a helpless expression. Well, when will we start preparing for Friends? Starting tomorrow, Eric said. I called you here today to discuss this matter. We have to start this project as soon as possible. I plan to add a few scenes from Friends into Dark War. Adding scenes from Dark War to Friends? Eric, are you talking about TIG advertisements? Even if Columbia agrees, it is not worth it. It might even cause the audience to dislike it. It's not a patch commercial, Eric denied, and explained to Jeffrey in detail what the shots were for. This is a good idea. Jeffrey nodded, then questioned, but it is less than 2 months, and you promised Fox that you would personally direct the first 2 episodes. Do you think you can complete it? Eric shook his head. No, I don't need to complete the shooting of any episode. All the ideas are in my head. We just need to confirm the characters as soon as possible, complete the set, and then shoot a few interesting scenes. Jeffrey felt that this plan was very feasible. Moreover, he could also see that if the plan was successful, it would have an unexpected publicity effect for Friends. But Eric, I have no experience in TV series production. Maybe you need an experienced TV series producer. I said, I won't let Fox intervene in this matter. Eric spread his hands. So, Jeffrey, you have to work a little harder. Jeffrey showed a somewhat ambiguous smile with a hint of ridicule. Actually, among the people you know, there is one who has been a TV series producer. Eric's thoughts turned. Soon, the pretty face of the stubborn girl and John Aniston, whom he had met a few times, appeared in his mind. John should be from NBC, and his main focus is on acting. Eric's first reaction was to resist. Father-in-law and son-in-law, these 2 creatures were naturally repellent. Jeffrey said, but he has more experience than me. I don't know anything about TV series production. If there is enough time, I can slowly explore it. But you are so tight on time, so... Eric rubbed the document in front of him a few times and nodded slightly. Then I will try to contact him as soon as possible. If it doesn't work, I still need you to do it. Jeffrey nodded. Then, about the actors? Jenny's role has been confirmed, Eric said. We still need 5 more roles. I will go back tonight and write down the requirements for the roles. I will give it to you tomorrow. Start the casting as soon as possible. This time, the scope shouldn't be too big. Otherwise, it will be too troublesome to interview. At the very least, we need actors with acting experience. I think there won't be as many people who are willing to sign up as compared to the previous movies. There won't be many to begin with, Jeffrey said with a smile. TV series are not as attractive as movies. After discussing things until 9 p.m., Eric left Firefly's office building. If he wanted to invite John Aniston to be the producer, it would be best to go through Jennifer Aniston. So, Eric drove to Jennifer Aniston's residence. When he arrived at the door of Jennifer Aniston's apartment, Eric did not knock on the door. As usual, he took out the spare key from the flower pot next to the door. But after turning the key a few times in the keyhole, he found that it was locked from the inside. It can't be because of me, right? Eric thought with a wry smile. He put the key back into the flower pot and knocked on the door. Who is it? The girl answered faintly. A moment later, the door opened a crack. Eric was about to push the door open when he found that there was a security chain in the crack. This thing was definitely newly installed. Look at the chain, it was shiny. This is definitely because of me. Eric thought so in his heart, but his body was leaning against the door frame in a posture that he thought was cool. He stared at Jennifer Aniston and asked in a very playful tone, "Girl, the night is long and you can't sleep. Do you need a strong man to comfort your lonely little soul? Get lost." Jennifer Aniston glared at Eric and slammed the door shut. Chapter 138. After Eric was given the cold shoulder, Jennifer Aniston leaned against the door triumphantly, waiting for him to knock again. At the same time, she thought about how she should mock him. Yes, she couldn't be nice to him tonight. As for whether she would let him stay or not, that would depend on his performance. Jennifer Aniston waited for 2 or 3 minutes, but there was no movement outside the door. Humph, he's definitely up to something. Don't think I'll fall for it. Although she was mumbling to herself, Jennifer Aniston couldn't help but look through the peephole. The voice-activated lights in the hallway had been turned off, and it was pitch black outside. Damn it, he must be hiding in the dark, waiting for her to open the door. Although Jennifer Aniston had this thought, she gradually became uneasy. Finally, after waiting for 5 minutes, Jennifer Aniston couldn't help but open the door a crack and look outside. At the same time, she stomped her foot to turn on the voice-activated lights in the hallway. But with the security chain in the way, Jennifer Aniston could only see a narrow line of sight. There was nothing in the empty hallway, and it was so quiet that it was disturbing. Unplugging the pin of the security chain, Jennifer Aniston opened the door and walked out. A familiar voice laughed from the right side of the door, and a pair of big hands attacked. Then, Jennifer Aniston floated up. Ah! Although she realized who had attacked her, Jennifer Aniston still screamed and struggled on Eric's shoulder. "You bastard, save me." Eric hugged the girl tightly and walked into the apartment. He turned around and closed the door. Slap. Feeling the pain, Jennifer Aniston was ashamed and angry. She struggled even harder. "It hurts, you bastard, put me down." Another slap, much lighter than before. At the same time, Eric's voice rang out. "Baby, stop screaming. The neighbors will call the police if you continue." Jennifer Aniston hammered Eric's back a few times. "Who let you in? You're trespassing. Wow, what a big crime. You won't shoot me, will you?" Eric laughed as he put Jennifer Aniston on the sofa in the living room. Once Jennifer Aniston was free, she immediately picked up a pillow and sat cross-legged on the sofa, glaring at Eric. Eric walked to the fridge, opened the door, and took a look inside. Smiling, he took out a can of beer and waved it at Jennifer Aniston. Jennifer Aniston immediately turned her head away proudly and defended herself. I didn't prepare it for you. I bought it for myself." TSK. Eric sat down on the sofa opposite Jennifer Aniston, pulled open the tab, and took a few sips. He smacked his lips and said, Love beer tastes really good." "Humph, the beer is finished. You can leave now. I still want to sleep." Just as she said that, there was a knock on the door. A man's voice came from outside the door. "Miss Jennifer Aniston, are you okay?" The two people in the house were stunned. Jennifer Aniston was the first to react. "Sorry to disturb the neighbors. You're the one who's shouting, aren't you?" Eric retorted. "That's also your fault." Jennifer Aniston stood up and walked to the door. Eric followed. When he opened the door, a middle-aged man and woman were standing outside. The man was holding a baseball bat, and the woman was holding a double-barreled shotgun. The two of them stood at the door cautiously. When they saw that Jennifer Aniston was safe and sound, they relaxed a little. "Miss Jennifer Aniston, we heard you shouting for help." The middle-aged man looked at the tall Eric behind Jennifer Aniston with a vigilant look in his eyes. Jennifer Aniston smiled and opened the door. She hugged Eric's arm and made an intimate gesture. She explained, "Sorry, Mr. Bateman, I'm sorry to disturb you. My boyfriend was just joking with me and gave me a fright." "Hello, Mr. Bateman. My name is Eric. I'm sorry to disturb you." Eric took the initiative to reach out and shook hands with the two of them. "It's okay." Mr. Bateman shook hands with Eric and chatted for a while. He rejected Jennifer Aniston and Eric's invitation to have a cup of coffee and left with his wife. When the door closed, Jennifer Aniston immediately let go of Eric's arm and returned to the sofa. Eric sat beside Jennifer Aniston and hugged the girl. Jennifer Aniston resisted twice and leaned on Eric's shoulder. "Jenny, have you been in contact with your father recently?" The girl raised her head slightly. "Yes, why are you asking this? What has John been doing recently?" Eric did not answer immediately. Instead, he asked another question. "I'm not sure about that." Jennifer Aniston counted on her fingers and said, "I only know that he has been acting in Days of Our Lives for the past few years." "Then, can you help me ask your father if he's interested in being a producer for a TV series?" Jennifer Aniston was a little confused. "A TV series? It's the TV series we discussed before. The one you have a role in." Eric explained to Jennifer Aniston in detail. "You mean, let my father be a producer for Friends?" Eric nodded. "Jeffrey isn't good at this, and we couldn't find anyone we could trust for the time being. Also, I don't want Fox to interfere with this TV series, so I thought of your father." Jennifer Aniston was suddenly unhappy. So this guy didn't come here specifically to look for her. That's despicable. She broke free from Eric's embrace and asked unhappily, "You came here tonight, just for this?" Eric quickly hugged Jennifer Aniston. "Of course not, I missed you, so I came here." Then, without waiting for Jennifer Aniston to react, Eric kissed the girl's red lips. After the kiss, Eric looked at the dazed Jennifer Aniston and smiled. This smile looked particularly evil to Jennifer Aniston, so she couldn't help but reach out and pinch Eric's leg. "Ah, you're so ruthless. Watch how I deal with you." Chapter 139. After John Aniston received Eric's invitation, he agreed almost immediately. Between a soap opera actor and a TV series producer, not many people would be willing to choose the former. In Hollywood, whether it was screenwriters, actors, or directors, once their career progressed to a certain extent, they would all choose to become producers. Because of this, John Aniston even resigned from some of his positions at NBC, and at the same time, reduced his screen time on Days of Our Lives. Even though he was already in his 50s, the same age as Jeffrey, his ambition was not any weaker than when he was younger. Even though they did not recoup any of the box office profits from Home Alone and Pretty Woman, due to Eric's two huge loans, Firefly was not short of money. The budget for each episode of the TV series was about US $200,000, and the total investment after production was completed was only US $5 million, which was equivalent to the investment for Scary Island. With the addition of John Aniston, the Friends project quickly started in early May. The crew rented two huge studios at 20th Century Fox to set up all the scenes for Friends. In his previous life, Friends was basically filmed at Warner Studios in Los Angeles. Even though Eric did not want Fox to participate in the TV series, if they had to look for Warner or Columbia to rent a studio, it would seem too deliberate. During a meeting, Eric did suggest building a studio for Friends, but Jeffrey and John jointly objected. The two of them agreed that it would cost too much, and the gains would not make up for the losses. Eric could only give up on the idea for the time being. As for the actors, Eric also fantasized that it would be perfect if he could gather all 6 actors from his previous life. Friends was released 5 years earlier than in his previous life, so according to the timeline, the oldest of the main cast, Lisa Kudrow, was only 26 years old, and the rest were between 20 and 24 years old. If they started acting at this time, then 10 years later, the actors would not show any obvious signs of age on screen. In his previous life, the reason Friends ended in the 10th season was partly because of the actors' salaries, but the most important reason was that the actors' ages were no longer suitable for the series to continue. Lisa Kudrow, who played Phoebe in the 10th season, was already 41 years old, and had already started playing the role of a mother on the big screen. It would be inappropriate for her to act cute and funny like a young person in the movie. Of course, gathering all 6 actors from his previous life was destined to only be a dream. Matthew Perry, who had been introduced by Jennifer Aniston to play the young and clumsy thief in Home Alone, was now an A-list movie actor. Asking an A-list Hollywood superstar to act in a sitcom was simply a pipe dream. As for the other actors, Eric did have some of their movies stored in his memory, but before this year, Eric could only remember that Courtney Cox had played a small role in The Magic Cocoon. There was not even a shadow of the others, and it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack to find them. Under such circumstances, Eric could only patiently start to choose the replacements for the other 5 friends. On Sunday, May 10th, the filming of Dark War was coming to an end. As long as there were no major accidents during the next working day, the filming would be completed smoothly. Therefore, Eric was able to take time out today to conduct the final audition for the actors of Friends. This was also the last round of screening. Because of Eric's previous request, the first thing the crew did was to audition the actors. Therefore, it only took 10 days. The set in the rented Fox studios was still in the early stages of construction, and the screening of the actors had already entered the final round of screening. Eric's plan was to shoot a few classic scenes of Friends during the post-production process of Dark War, from mid-May to mid-June to add them to the movie. The official filming of the TV series would have to wait until Dark War was released in July. According to Fox's plan, the TV series would be released in early September, which would coincide with the end of the summer and the beginning of the fall of the American TV series. Moreover, Eric estimated that he would only be able to spend 2 weeks shooting the first 2 episodes of the TV series. After that, he would have to work non-stop on the preparation work for the 2 movies in the second half of the year. He also had to worry about the release of the other 3 movies. Basically, he wouldn't have any free time in the second half of the year. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Eric walked into the company and saw many men and women waiting in the corridor. These people obviously knew Eric. After Eric appeared, they took the initiative to greet Eric. A few young girls even threw meaningful glances at Eric. Eric nodded at the crowd and walked into the audition room. He hadn't seen the list of actors for the last round. Also, because none of the actors had a clue, Eric had to do the interview himself. He couldn't just draw a circle like he did when he was casting for Scary Island and Knowing Women by Smelling Fragrance. Jeffrey John, good morning. When he walked into the audition room, he saw that Jeffrey and John Aniston were already there. The 2 of them were whispering something. When they saw Eric, they stood up and greeted Eric. Good morning, Eric. Good morning, Eric. Eric walked to the back of the long table and sat down. A blonde female assistant took the initiative to approach Eric and put a stack of documents in front of Eric. Mr. Williams, this is the list of actors for today's audition. The order has been marked on it. The crew of Friends was formed by his own contacts in the television industry. The blonde was also a relatively experienced staff member he found. Now that the blonde was seducing his daughter's boyfriend in front of him, how could John Aniston be happy? Eric guessed that the blonde would not stay on the set for long. However, perhaps the blonde did not know much about the relationship between John Aniston and Eric, or perhaps she knew but did not take it to heart. Therefore, she seduced Eric in front of Eric. With Eric's identity as a billionaire at a young age, any slightly ambitious woman in Hollywood would throw herself at him. This was not the first time Eric had encountered this kind of seduction. Okay, I understand. After the blonde finished her introduction, Eric nodded lightly. Then, my name is Linda Grant. Mr. Williams, you can call me Linda. The blonde straightened her back and intentionally or unintentionally showed off her wonderful figure wrapped in a professional suit. "Thank you, Miss Linda." Eric smiled at the blonde and thanked her. John Aniston's voice finally sounded. "Linda, let the young people waiting outside get ready. We'll start right away." "Okay, Mr. Jennifer Aniston." The blonde nodded and walked out of the audition room. Ahem, Eric, Linda, is married. Her husband is a sound recordist. For some reason, John Aniston whispered this in Eric's ear when the blonde left. Eric shrugged innocently. "John, I didn't do anything." "Eric, although it's inevitable to act in Hollywood, you'd better be careful not to hurt Jenny. She's actually still a very innocent little girl." Eric nodded guiltily. "Don't worry, John, I'll be careful." John Aniston shook his head. "Actually, I hope you can take the initiative to break up with Jenny." Eric immediately refused. "Unless Jenny takes the initiative to leave me, I won't break up with Jenny." After Eric said this, he secretly added in his heart, "Even if she wants to leave me, I'll find a way to get her back." Of course, he couldn't say this out loud, otherwise John Aniston might do something. John Aniston obviously couldn't guess what Eric was thinking. He patted him on the shoulder and started the audition. Only then did Eric have the chance to look down at the list of auditionees. Sure enough, at a glance, there weren't any famous movie stars. Eric didn't watch many American TV series in his previous life, so it was reasonable that he didn't know the people in the American TV series circle. After all, there were very few young people in their 20s who could make a name for themselves. By the time American TV series became more and more sophisticated and could even challenge the status of movies, these people would already be in their 30s and 40s. Even if they appeared in American TV series, they would be unremarkable supporting roles. After flipping through several long pages of the audition list, he couldn't find a single familiar name. Bored to death, he flipped to the last page. This page was the list of actresses who had applied for the role of Phoebe Buffy. Eric finally found a familiar name, and it was the kind that he was very familiar with, Nicole Kidman. This made Eric a little surprised. Why would Nicole Kidman apply for a TV series? Eric carefully checked the spelling to make sure it was the correct name, so he waved at Linda Grant, who walked in again. The blonde immediately came up to him. "Mr. Williams, what's the matter? Where is the detailed information of the actors? I want to see the information of the audition this afternoon. Please wait a moment." Linda responded and walked out. A moment later, she came back with a few folders. "Mr. Williams, it's all here." "Thank you, just call me Eric," Eric thanked her. Ignoring the curious eyes of Jeffrey and John Aniston next to him, he began to search. Soon, he found Nicole Kidman's file. With just a glance, Eric recognized the woman in the photo posted on the file. She had brown wavy hair, a round face, blue glasses, and thin lips. After a quick glance, the woman's resume stopped at an Australian TV series called No Sin Alive. She had also acted in several TV series and movies before. In other words, crossing the horizon, which made Nicole Kidman enter Hollywood, was no longer there. Was this also the butterfly effect he had brought? Eric rubbed the edge of the paper and thought about it. In the end, he had to admit that this must be the case. Ever since he published Jurassic Park last year and entered Hollywood through Back to 17, everything in the world had changed. This reminded Eric of the dominoes he had seen in his previous life. As long as the first domino was pushed, it would cause thousands of dominoes to fall. This was the most vivid interpretation of the butterfly effect. According to the timeline in his memory, Nicole Kidman should have acted in Crossing the Horizon before coming to Hollywood. Then, she quickly hooked up with Tom Cruise through Thunder High. She ruined Cruise's original family and became Mrs. Cruise. From then on, she went from an unknown vase actress to a top vase in Hollywood. More than 10 years later, she even won an Oscar for Best Actress. Thinking of this trivial information, Eric could only conclude that this woman was very impressive. Among all of Cruise's women, she was the only one who had the best career. Even after she divorced Cruise, her career was not affected. Instead, it went to a higher level. Soon, she entered the 20 million pay club and successfully won an Oscar for Best Actress. As for Cruise's first wife, she did not leave any impression at all. His last wife, Katie Holmes, did not get any benefits from Cruise either. After the divorce, because of her identity as Mrs. Cruise, no man was willing or dared to go on a date with her. During the interview in the morning, Eric became more and more interested in this woman. During the lunch break, Eric winked at the female assistant who had been trying to seduce him and went to the stairwell at the end of the corridor. "Eric, what's the matter?" Linda looked at Eric curiously and nervously. She felt that she was not prepared. Was this little director going to do something here? "It's like this, Linda." Eric took out a page of information. "This is Miss Nicole Kidman. After her interview in the afternoon, take her to my office and ask her to wait for me there. I want to talk to her alone." Linda took the information and looked at Nicole Kidman's photo. She found that this woman was far more beautiful than her. She was a little disappointed, but still nodded. "Okay, Eric. I'll tell her. Do you have anything else?" Eric shook his head honestly. "No." "Oh." Linda lowered her head. The tips of her high heels rubbed against the cement floor a few times. Just when she had the courage to look up and say something, she found that there was no one in front of her. This unromantic little guy is really too infuriating. The woman stomped her feet, turned around and walked back in disappointment. After an afternoon of auditions, the remaining 5 roles had been preliminarily confirmed. Eric also met Nicole Kidman, who was auditioning at around 4 in the afternoon. There was no problem with the woman's performance, but compared to the image of Lisa Kudrow in his memory, Nicole Kidman was too beautiful. Monica Geller's role had already been confirmed as a black-haired beauty, who was somewhat similar to Courtney Cox. If Phoebe Buffay chose another beauty, the sitcom would definitely be a little distorted. Therefore, Eric, John, and the others basically unanimously did not consider Nicole Kidman. Instead, they chose another girl with a more ordinary appearance. The auditions ended at 5 o'clock. Eric, John Aniston, and the others had been discussing the shooting plan of Friends in the conference room until 7 o'clock in the evening. Everyone left. Eric's mind was in a mess, and he almost forgot about what he had told the female assistant. When he walked out of the office building, he remembered and hurriedly turned back. Now that the sky was completely dark, Eric was not sure if Nicole Kidman would leave early, but it was unlikely. With this woman's intelligence, it was impossible for her to leave early. Even if Eric did not appear tonight, this woman would patiently wait in his office. When he opened the office door, he saw a woman sitting on the sofa. Only the desk lamp on the desk was turned on in the office, so it was very dark. Eric recognized her at a glance. When she saw Eric open the door and enter, the woman stood up. Eric closed the door, turned on the office light, and said, "Hello, Miss Kidman." "Hello, Mr. Williams." There was no trace of impatience on the woman's face. With a faint smile, she took 2 steps forward and took the initiative to shake Eric's hand. Eric inadvertently glanced at the woman and found that she was barefooted, and her high heels were on the side. What a meticulous woman! She could even notice such a small detail like his height. Eric was only a little over 1.8 meters tall, and Nicole Kidman was about the same height. Perhaps the girl felt that if she wore high heels and was taller than Eric, it might make him unhappy, which was why she did this. Eric sighed in his heart and returned to his seat. "Sorry, Miss Kidman. I've kept you waiting. I've been in a meeting." "It's okay, Mr. Williams. You can call me Nicole." "Okay, Nicole. Likewise, you can call me Eric." As Eric spoke, he leaned back in the leather chair and stopped talking. He carefully looked at the woman in front of him. Nicole Kidman was not in a hurry to ask Eric why he had made her wait. Perhaps she felt that there was no need to ask. This kind of thing was obvious, wasn't it? Was she so unattractive that this man, who was a few years younger than her, was absent-minded? The office was silent for a few minutes, and Nicole Kidman finally couldn't help but speak first. Eric. Yes, oh sorry, Nicole, I suddenly remembered something. Eric finally came back to his senses, smiled at Nicole Kidman apologetically, and asked, Nicole, according to the file, you're doing well in Australia. Why did you suddenly come to Hollywood? All actors in the world yearn to go to Hollywood to prove themselves, and I'm no exception. I hope that I can get a better development in Hollywood. That's not easy. You haven't even acted in a Hollywood movie before, and if you want to prove yourself in Hollywood, you shouldn't have come to audition for a role in a TV series. It's just that I haven't met the right role. Nicole Kidman guiltily found an excuse. I think this TV series should be good, so I came to try. How could Nicole Kidman not want to act in a movie? But in this time and space, she was not as lucky as in her previous life. She came to Hollywood at the beginning of the year, and like all smug actors, she came to the world's film center with all kinds of unrealistic fantasies. In the end, after a few months, she had participated in a lot of auditions, but only got a small supporting role in one movie. In the end, she had to turn her eyes to TV series. Developing from the small screen to the big screen was also the road to fame for many Hollywood stars. Eric suddenly thought of something and asked curiously, Nicole, did you come to Hollywood alone? Yeah, Nicole Kidman said, feeling a little confused. Eric nodded non-committally. The office was silent for a few seconds, and Nicole Kidman couldn't help but ask the question she was most concerned about. So, Mr. Director, did I get the role of Phoebe Buffy? Sorry, no, the role has been decided for someone else. Eric shook his head and answered honestly. Nicole Kidman was stunned for a moment. What was going on? If the other party had said something like, I'm still thinking about it, or, it depends on your performance, Nicole Kidman would have understood what to do. She did not expect the other party to directly tell her that the role had been given to someone else. Can you tell me why? Nicole Kidman's thoughts were a little chaotic. Eric changed into a more comfortable position and explained, I decided unanimously with several other producers because you're too beautiful. Huh? Nicole Kidman was a little speechless. It's like this. Eric sat up straight and explained, in the setting of the story, Phoebe is a girl with a very rough life. She was abandoned by her biological parents when she was young, and later her stepmother committed suicide. The 14-year-old girl wandered alone to New York, struggled at the bottom, and finally became a masseuse. What does this have to do with appearance? It has a lot to do with it. Eric continued, do you think that if a very beautiful 14-year-old girl wandered the streets of New York, she would peacefully grow into her 20s, live an ordinary life, and make a lot of good friends? Of course not. Although Nicole Kidman came from a well-off middle-class family, it wasn't as if she had never seen the dark side of society. If Phoebe was very beautiful, and if she was lucky, she could find a good man to marry and become a housewife. After all, beautiful women were a scarce resource everywhere. But if she was very unlucky, she would end up very miserable. Eric, if that's the case, then why did you ask me to wait for you here? Because I'm curious. I'm very curious about you, so I wanted to talk to you. That's it. The girl looked at Eric in disbelief. This reason was too far-fetched. Eric shrugged, stood up and said, That's it. I just wanted to talk to you. It's very late, Nicole. I'm sorry to have made you wait for so long. Let me treat you to dinner. Okay. Nicole Kidman stood up disappointedly, put on her high heels, and walked out of the office with Eric side by side. They went downstairs together under the playful gaze of the security guard who stayed behind. When they were eating in an attached restaurant, the tall girl looked like she had a lot on her mind, as if she was struggling with something in her heart. Eric, on the other hand, ate a lot with relish and chatted with the girl as if nothing had happened. After dinner, they walked out of the restaurant and Eric got into his car. Nicole Kidman saw that Eric was about to say goodbye to her. Finally, she could not help but open the door of Eric's car and sit in the passenger seat. The girl knew very well that if she missed this opportunity, she would probably have to return to Australia with her tail between her legs. In the few months that she had been in Hollywood, Nicole Kidman had seen a lot of the cruel competition in Hollywood. The highest status person she had dealt with was only an independent film director who was not famous in Hollywood. Although her performance had won several small awards in Australia, it did not matter at all in Hollywood. Nicole. Eric looked curiously at the girl who got into his car. Her own car was parked next to him. Okay, Mr. Williams, what do I have to do to get the role? Please tell me directly, okay? After saying this, the girl's breathing became a little rapid. Her pair of blue eyes stared seriously at Eric, with an imposing manner of going all out. But that role has already been decided, Eric replied seriously. Then why did you do these unnecessary things? Giving people hope and then crushing it so quickly, don't you think this is too much? Okay, I apologize. I really just did it because I was curious. Then I let a woman wait in the office for a few hours, and talked about a few random things. This is ridiculous. Do you think anyone will believe it? Then what else do you want? Eric was also a little impatient. The girl hesitated for a moment, then reached out and grabbed Eric's arm and pressed it on her thigh. Mr. Williams, I know your situation very well. You are the young director with the most potential in Hollywood. I also heard about Julia Roberts, so can you give me a chance? Eric glanced at the girl's hand on his thigh. Although it was separated by trousers, Eric still felt an inexplicable warmth. After Dark War, there is a movie that you can try. Like Wind and Moon, it's also a romantic comedy, Eric finally said. The girl's hand on Eric's arm tightened, and an excited expression appeared on her face. You know, I've been quite busy recently. That movie will start shooting at least in July or August, maybe even later. No problem, I can wait, Nicole Kidman said without hesitation. Eric shook his head. It's not like that. I mean, I've been quite busy recently, and I need a servant at home. Ah. Nicole Kidman opened her mouth slightly. Eric's lips curled into a mischievous smile. I'm too busy, and I need someone to prepare 3 meals a day for me. Oh, I'm usually not home at noon, so 2 meals a day will be enough. Also, I don't like hourly cleaners coming to my house to help clean and tidy up my room. If you're willing, you can come over from May to September to make a cameo appearance as a maid. Ah. Nicole Kidman still couldn't wrap her head around it. After thinking for a moment, the girl asked tentatively, Am I, Eric, the female lead? Eric revealed a triumphant smile. Of course, if you perform well, you'll be like Julia, becoming an A-list actress in one movie. Many actresses in Hollywood might not have such a good opportunity in their entire career. I need to think about it. Nicole Kidman raised her head. Of course, if you've thought it through, contact me as soon as possible. By the way, if you agree, you'll have to stay in my mansion for the next few months. Why? Nicole Kidman was a little scared, and some embarrassing words popped up in her mind. I have an official girlfriend, so I don't want a young and beautiful woman coming in and out of my mansion. Also, you don't want others to know how you got this role after you become famous, right? I understand. Nicole Kidman nodded. The two chatted for a while more before parting ways. When they got home, Eric was still excited about his mischievous idea. He was sure that Nicole Kidman wouldn't reject this proposal, and he even thought that perhaps this system could be used forever. This way, he wouldn't have to hire some unknown hourly cleaners to clean his house, and he wouldn't have to worry about his 3 meals every day. More importantly, what could be more satisfying than having a star-studded celebrity from his previous life as his maid? At the beginning of a new week, the final filming of Dark War began. The bigger scenes had been completed, and the rest were scattered outdoor scenes. 5 days later, on a street in downtown Los Angeles, the crew of Dark War began filming the final scene. Although the crew had worked intensely for a month and a half, they all looked relaxed. On the bus, Sean had a newspaper under his arm and a bucket of popcorn in his hand. He sat down on a seat and caught a glimpse of the girl's sapphire necklace behind him. After hesitating for a moment, Sean couldn't help but turn around and stare at the necklace in front of the girl for a few seconds. When the girl looked alarmed, he said, "Sorry, I mistook you for someone else." "It's okay," Yo-Yo replied calmly. At the same time, she inadvertently looked out of the window. "The necklace is beautiful. Where did you buy it? Sean couldn't help but ask. A friend gave it to me. It's fake and very cheap. When Yo-Yo heard him mention the necklace, she perked up a little. Sean smiled and said, Boyfriend? Yo-Yo shook her head and said, I haven't seen him in a long time. Keep it well, Sean said. He turned around and looked away. Maybe he'll suddenly appear one day. Ha, he'll scare you. Yo-Yo smiled expectantly. Perhaps she also felt that the hope was slim, but she still stubbornly rode this bus every day, hoping that Andy would appear again. The bus gradually stopped. At the same time, Eric said, This scene is over. There's one last scene left. Everyone, get ready. Yo-Yo, oh no, Brooke. Next is the scene I asked you to perform in the audition room. Although there are still a few hours left, I still hope you can pass it as soon as possible. Oh, there's a celebration party tonight. I'll do my best, Eric, Brooke replied with a smile. The last scene began. Another day passed, and Yo-Yo still didn't see Andy. She got off the bus in disappointment. Several cameras were shooting Brooke from inside the bus and across the street at the same time. Although she had practiced many times in the audition room, Brooke Xiaoxi still took 4 or 5 NGs to complete the scene. After Eric shouted, Good! With satisfaction, everyone around him applauded. Eric held the loudspeaker and said, I hereby announce that Dark War has officially ended. Clean up the scene immediately. Tonight at the Hilton Hotel, everyone must be present. No one can be missing. Oh! Cheers rang out, and many crew members couldn't help but take off their hats and throw them into the air. Eric smiled and explained the matter. Then, he walked to an armored escort car next to him. 4 bodyguards in suits stood vigilantly next to the armored car. A middle-aged man in his 40s was putting the sapphire necklace that Brooke used during the filming into a safe. Mr. Derek, thank you for your sponsorship. After the man put the safe with the diamonds into the car, Eric warmly greeted him and shook his hand. You're welcome, Eric. This is a win-win situation. The middle-aged man named Derek politely shook Eric's hand and said, Then, Eric, I have to leave as soon as possible. I feel uneasy if the gemstone stays outside for another minute. It's okay, I understand, Eric replied with a smile. In addition to a series of sponsorship brands, there was also a very important prop in Dark War, which was the sapphire that the bald monk snatched. It wasn't that no one had mentioned using props before. They only needed to find a blue crystal worth a few $100s. However, after some consideration, Eric still decided to use the real thing. However, he didn't have any connections in this area. After contacting Colombia, Amy Pascal reported and the other party quickly found a blue diamond worth $10 million. It was said that the gem came from a collector in the United Kingdom. The collector planned to auction the diamond at Christie's this autumn. It just so happened that the senior management of Colombia had a good personal relationship with the collector. After some communication, the collector reluctantly agreed to take the gem. However, the process was not easy. Every time the gem participated in the filming, there were 4 bodyguards next to it who stared at the gem without blinking. They were always within 5 meters of the sapphire. Everyone in the crew was nervous because of these 4 people. Fortunately, there were no problems during the entire filming process. Chapter 141. After a month and a half of high-intensity filming, especially the 1 month of outdoor filming, the actors were better off, but the dozens of crew members were exhausted. Therefore, the celebration after the casting became particularly unrestrained because of the sudden relaxation after a long period of pressure. The party hall was noisy, and from time to time, someone would make a few high-pitched screams. Eric just laughed at this situation. After all, everyone had been suppressed for a month, so it was reasonable for them to lose their composure. Most of the actors of Dark War received invitations to the party, and several of the leading actors also came to the party. However, after seeing the chaotic scene, Cruz, who was self-conscious, only stayed for less than 20 minutes before leaving. Although he was born at the bottom, he had now automatically classified himself as a group of people at the top of the pyramid. Of course, it was impossible for him to fool around with this group of crew members. Some of the older crew members and actors also left one after another. With Eric's mental age, it was true that he could not enjoy this kind of party, but as the director of Dark War, he had to stay. In the whole hall, Eric was the youngest. Although Eric would look very oppressive when he scolded others on set, he still looked like a harmless young man. In addition, the crew members were more familiar with Eric's character and knew that he was a person who could take a joke, so he naturally became the target of everyone's teasing. After being forced to drink a few bottles of beer for various reasons, Eric left the crowd in the name of going to the bathroom at the end of the corridor. When he came out, he didn't know if it was a coincidence or not, but he happened to see Brooke coming out of the bathroom on the opposite side. She was lowering her head and wiping her hands with a tissue. "Hey, Brooke," Eric greeted her with a smile. "Did you have a good time?" Brooke smiled sweetly. It was okay, although it was a bit noisy. As the most beautiful woman at the party, Brooke Shousey naturally became the focus of everyone's attention. Brooke Shousey also enjoyed the feeling of being sought after, but Eric's attitude towards her had always been indifferent. Seeing that Eric was about to leave after greeting her, Brooke Shousey hurriedly stuffed the tissue in her hand into the trash can, caught up with him in a few steps, and reached out to pull Eric. "Brooke, what's the matter?" Eric turned around. Brooke hesitated for a moment before saying, I just want to thank you, Eric. Thank you for giving me the role of Yo-Yo." She wasn't being polite at all. Ever since Brooke was revealed to be the female lead of Dark War, many media outlets had talked about how she had been nominated for several Golden Raspberry Awards in a row, implying that it was impossible for her to get the role on her own, and that there must be something going on behind the scenes. However, it was an indisputable fact that Brooke's popularity had soared again. The media's attention on her had rapidly increased, and paparazzi had once again appeared around her when she went out. This kind of situation hadn't happened for many years. The last time it happened was when she was close to Michael Jackson a few years ago. More importantly, this kind of attention could bring her practical economic benefits. During this period, she had already received several advertising endorsement offers. "That's nothing, Brooke. Your performance in Dark War was still very good. I believe that after the movie is released, your image will definitely leave a deep impression on the audience." So, Brooke heard Eric's praise, looked at him expectantly, and asked, "Eric, will we have a chance to work together again in the future?" Eric hesitated for a moment. He didn't expect the girl to ask so bluntly. If he were to tell her the truth, he would definitely not work with her anymore. However, Eric certainly wouldn't say such hurtful words. "Brooke, you have to understand that this requires the right opportunity." Brooke Shousey's expression quickly dimmed. Any man who saw Choo Choo's expression would feel sorry for her. She was simply a seductress. Eric looked at the girl's expression and even felt a faint sense of guilt. After thinking about it, he tried to persuade her. "Brooke, I think you should focus on independent movies. First, choose a few good scripts to hone your acting skills." Brooke started acting at the age of 12, and until she got the role of Dark War, she had basically been wandering in the independent film industry for more than 10 years. She had long understood that if she wanted to stand out in the independent film industry, the most important thing was to have excellent acting skills. With her acting skills, she could win some weighty film awards and then enter the mainstream film industry. However, this path was impossible for her because she was too beautiful. Even if she had a little acting skills, they would be covered by her face and devilish figure. Not to mention that she didn't have that kind of acting skills. Even if she returned to the independent film industry, she could only play the role of a vase. There was no way she could stand out. Brooke certainly understood that even if she wanted to play the role of a vase, she should play the role of a vase in a big production. Even a supporting role in a big production would have more influence than the lead role in a small production. Unfortunately, although Brooke was somewhat famous, she was just a beautiful star. She was not enough to attract the interest of the mainstream film industry in Hollywood. There were countless actresses who were both beautiful and good at acting in this industry. Not many big productions dared to invite her, a vase who had been nominated several times by the Golden Raspberry Awards, to take the risk. Eric could be regarded as the first director who dared to take the risk in recent years. Eric, I know my ability. If I return to the independent film industry, I will never be able to stand out. Are you free tomorrow? Maybe I can treat you to a meal to express my gratitude. No need, Brooke. Eric refused. Noticing the embarrassed look on the girl's face, he quickly added, to be honest, after Dark War is released, I believe that with the influence of your role, you will definitely receive many movie offers. As long as you choose the script carefully, even if you only play the role of a vase in a few movies, as long as the movie sells well, you will definitely be able to join the ranks of A-list actresses. So, you don't have to pin your hopes on me at all. Brooke was originally very disappointed by Eric's refusal, but after hearing Eric's last few words, she suddenly became enlightened. Although the girl was not very smart, she could still understand these things. If Dark War made her popular, she really didn't have to go back to acting in a small production. In that case, Eric, thank you. Brooke Shousey finally showed a satisfied expression after thinking it through. It was as if the series of disappointed expressions just now had never appeared on her face. After the girl finished speaking, her beautiful eyes blinked twice. She suddenly stepped forward, held Eric's shoulder, and kissed him gently on the corner of his mouth. Seeing Eric's stunned expression because of her sudden sneak attack, the girl showed a bright smile, turned around, and walked to the banquet hall. Eric touched the corner of his mouth, shook his head, and walked to the banquet hall with a smile. Eric, you've been gone for so long. Did something happen? Seeing Eric appear, Tom Hanks walked up and handed a glass of champagne to Eric. He then mockingly gestured at Brooke, who was chatting with someone not far away. Eric took a sip of the champagne and showed a smile that said, "You know what I mean." Hanks also showed a smirk. The two of them looked at each other a few times in disgust before Hanks slightly restrained his expression. If he continued to joke, he would be misunderstood. Eric, do you have any ideas for my next movie? I'm waiting. Hanks also stretched out 5 fingers and waved them in front of Eric's eyes, as if reminding him not to forget the promise of the 5 movies that grossed more than 100 million yuan. In the previous agreement, Eric did not count Dark War as one of the 5 movies. The script has been written for a long time, Eric said. After the post-production dubbing of Dark War is completed, you can start preparing. Hanks was also a workaholic, especially in the past few years. He would take on 2 or 3 movies every year. He was definitely considered diligent in the circle of actors. When he heard Eric's words, Hanks also became energetic. Can you tell me the plot first? Let's go over there and talk. Eric pointed to the sofa in the corner. A couple just left from there and walked to the dance floor. Hanks nodded and the two of them walked over. This is also a romantic comedy. It's called Sleepless in Seattle. It's a script I came up with when I went to New York. Romantic comedy? Hanks touched his face hesitantly. A few years ago, Hanks was still a little handsome, and it was acceptable for him to act in romantic comedies. But after 30 years old, Hanks was basically not handsome anymore. Eric, do you think my image is suitable for this kind of movie? Don't worry, this is not an ordinary romantic comedy between a young man and a woman, Eric explained. You will play a single father in the movie. Single father. Okay, don't interrupt. Tom, listen to me first, okay? Okay. Hanks raised his hand. Eric then said, the story is like this. After his wife died of an unexpected illness, the infatuated Sam couldn't forget his wife for a long time. So he decided to leave the sad place of Chicago and move to Seattle with his 8-year-old son, Jonah. A year later, on Christmas Day, his son, Jonah, dialed a radio-emotional hotline that was sent to the entire United States. He wanted to find a new wife for his father who still hadn't walked out of the shadow of his wife's death. Coincidentally, this emotional call connected Sam's family with a woman named Annie who was far away in New York. Although Anne was engaged, she was moved by Sam's infatuation and couldn't help but write a letter to Sam. This letter fell into the hands of Sam's son, Jonah. Jonah felt that Anne was a good match for his father, so he wrote a letter for his father and agreed that they would meet on the top floor of the Empire State Building in New York on Valentine's Day. Golden Jade League? After listening to Eric's narration, Hanks blurted out. Eric nodded. There will be many scenes in this movie that will pay homage to Golden Jade League. Eric, according to what you said, will the story of this movie be simple? Eric smiled and spread out his hands. Tom, I'm just telling you the story. This is a standard high-concept movie. The story is simple and even a little cliché. This is the main characteristic of high-concept movies. If a movie wants to be a hit, it must first have a simple and clear storyline. The rest depends on the strength of the director and actors. Chapter 142. Well, I understand. So, when will the movie start shooting? I don't know. Eric took a sip of champagne and explained, You see, I have to go through the post-production of Dark Battle. After the movie is released in July, I have to produce a TV series for Fox. Barry Diller asked me to direct the first 2 episodes personally, so I'm not sure when the movie will start shooting. Tom, haven't you already shot 2 movies this year? You can give yourself a break for a while. Being an actor is so tiring. If you can't enjoy life, what's the fun of getting such a high salary? Oh, according to what you said, you have to shoot 4 movies this year. I heard that you are also the producer of 3 other movies. Isn't a madman who makes 7 movies a year hopeless? No, it's not the same. Eric shook his head calmly and repeated, I'm very different from you guys. Hanks couldn't help but roll his eyes and tease, Are you an alien? Yes, my journey is the sea of stars. The two laughed together. The party lasted until midnight. Although Eric was forced to drink a few bottles of beer at the beginning, he didn't drink much after that. So, he refused the designated driver and drove slowly home. In order to prevent paparazzi, there were no streetlights in front of the mansions of many famous Hollywood celebrities in Beverly Hills. It was the same in front of Eric's house. Therefore, when Eric got out of the car and opened the door, he was startled by the woman's voice next to him. The woman shouted his name and then appeared in the range of the car's lights. Eric recognized the tall figure. It was Nicole Kidman, whom he hadn't heard from for several days. After Eric proposed the disgusting condition, he temporarily put the matter at the back of his mind. He didn't expect her to suddenly appear here. Nicole, why are you here? Eric asked subconsciously. At the same time, he couldn't help but look up and down at Nicole Kidman's outfit. Nicole Kidman was wearing a black slim long trench coat and a pair of black high heels, which accentuated the girl's tall and slender figure. If Eric ignored the fluffy curly hair on her head, which Eric thought was so old-fashioned, she did have some resemblance to the cool and elegant queen from his previous life. The woman couldn't help but take a step back under Eric's gaze. She stuttered, I understand. I'm willing. Will you do what? Marry me? Eric couldn't help but tease her. Although the light was weak, Eric still saw the girl's face quickly become rosy, so he stopped teasing her. He took out the key to open the door and said, Well, come in with me first. Nicole Kidman returned to where she had been and pulled out a small suitcase. She lowered her head and got into Eric's car. After parking the car, Eric brought the woman to the villa. He pointed at the sofa and said, Nicole, take a seat first. Nicole Kidman placed her suitcase beside the sofa, took off her windbreaker, and hung it on the hanger before sitting down on the sofa. Seeing Eric turn around and walk into the kitchen, the girl's tense body relaxed a little, and she looked around. Although the design of the villa was mainly modern and simple, it was exquisite everywhere. Although Nicole was born in a good middle-class family, she was full of envy for the mansions in Beverly Hills that she had long heard of. Perhaps, if this man's promise was true, she would only need a few years to buy a villa like this in Beverly Hills. Thinking of this, the girl's apprehension lessened a little, and she looked forward to it. Eric quickly walked out of the kitchen with a cup of coffee. Nicole Kidman hurriedly stood up and wanted to go up to him. Sit down. You are still a guest, Eric said as he pushed a cup of coffee in front of the woman. Nicole Kidman sat down again and picked up the cup of coffee. After feeling the scalding temperature, she put it back on the coffee table. Her slender fingers rubbed her knees a few times before she raised her head and looked at Eric. "Mr. Williams." "Call me Eric." Eric, can you first confirm that?" "I don't want to." The woman twisted her fingers on her knees. Her voice was full of anxiety. She was afraid that she would make the man in front of her unhappy if she appeared too eager, but she also hoped to hear some accurate promises from Eric. The woman didn't want to stay here for a few months only to be kicked out by the other party with nothing to show for it. As for what Eric said before, Nicole Kidman didn't believe him at all. This was also the reason why she hesitated for several days. However, her desire for fame and fortune made her unable to hold back and take the initiative to come to him. Eric enjoyed the woman's awkward appearance with great interest for a while before he stood up and said, "Wait a moment." With that, he walked towards the stairs. Nicole Kidman stared at Eric's figure until he disappeared around the corner of the stairs. Then, she subconsciously looked at the trench coat hanging on a hanger not far away. Eric soon appeared again. The woman quickly pretended to be calm and took a sip of coffee. Eric came to the sofa and put a few printed documents in front of Nicole Kidman. The top is the script. The bottom two are the actor's contract. After you read and sign, keep one for yourself and give the other to me. Nicole Kidman didn't expect things to be so simple. She excitedly picked up the script at the top and looked at the name. Sleepless in Seattle. As the woman flipped through the pages, Eric explained while holding a cup of coffee, "The male lead for this movie has already been decided. It's Tom Hanks. If you pay attention to the entertainment news, you should know who Hanks is. The female lead could have been given to Julia Roberts, but in the plan, she also has a movie coming out at the end of the year. Also, Wind and Moon is too influential, so it's not suitable for her to take on a romantic comedy in the short term. I haven't had time to invite other actresses before you appeared in front of me. I have to say, Nicole, you're very lucky." Nicole Kidman listened attentively to Eric's explanation, but her eyes didn't leave the script for a moment. After quickly flipping through it, the woman put the script back. She felt dizzy. "Eric, is this really for me?" "Of course. But your experience in Australia is completely useless in Hollywood, so you can only be considered a newcomer. Your salary is the same as when Julia took on Wind and Moon. $300,000. No bonus." As Nicole Kidman listened to Eric's explanation, she reached for the two contracts again. Eric stopped her. "It's too late now. We should rest. Anyway, we still have a few months. You can take your time to read them. Just give me one of them after you've finished reading them and sign them." Hearing Eric's words, the woman lowered her head slightly. "Then, okay. Come with me." Eric stood up. The woman held the documents in her arms, took the windbreaker and suitcase, and led Eric upstairs. Eric led the woman to the second floor and opened the door to an empty bedroom. "This is your bedroom. The bedding is in the wardrobe. It's all new. Make do with it. If you're not satisfied, you can change it tomorrow." "Well, thank you," the woman whispered. Eric briefly introduced the facilities in the room before saying, "You should rest early. I'm going back to the bedroom." Eric turned and left, closing the bedroom door behind him. Nicole Kidman, who was standing in the room, was about to move when the door was pushed open again. The woman subconsciously shrank her neck, but soon relaxed. She lowered her hands and bit her lips, waiting for something to happen. Eric looked at the woman, who looked like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. He smiled and gestured in the air, explaining, "Nicole, I just forgot the most important thing. I want to remind you that starting tomorrow, you have to start fulfilling your duties. I usually wake up at 7, so I don't want you to wake up later than me. Breakfast has to be ready before 8. I'm not picky in this regard. You can use the ingredients in the kitchen to make what you're best at. Dinner is the same. Cleaning the villa and the surroundings is also your job. You can decide how to clean it, as long as it's clean." The woman nodded nervously. "Eric, I understand. Well, good night. Sleep early," Eric said as he closed the bedroom door again. Nicole heard the click of the door lock and sat down in exhaustion. She took a few quick breaths and stared at the door in a daze. After waiting for a few minutes and making sure that he wouldn't open the door again, the woman pulled the black windbreaker on the side and took out the tape recorder from the inside pocket. She pressed the stop button and looked at the documents on the table. The corners of her mouth twitched as if she wanted to smile, but she couldn't. After thinking about it, the woman rewound the tape, lowered the volume, and pressed the play button. Sound came out of the tape recorder. Although it wasn't very loud, it was enough to clearly distinguish every word of the conversation. Click. The door was suddenly pushed open again. Eric appeared at the door holding a pillow. "Sorry, I think you need this." With a bang, the tape recorder fell to the floor. It bounced a few times, but it still stubbornly played the sound. Tom Hanks will play the role. As long as you pay attention to the entertainment news, you should know who Hanks is. The female lead could have been given to Julia Roberts. Eric's soft but clear voice echoed in the silent bedroom. Eric stared at the small object in a daze. Nicole didn't know how to react at all. She sat there with cold hands and feet. Her body trembled slightly, and her eyes were filled with despair and fear. Chapter 143. Seeing that Nicole Kidman was so frightened that she almost fainted, Eric walked in and threw the pillow in his hand over. He picked up the tape recorder on the ground and turned it off. "Silly woman, don't you know how to lock the door after doing this kind of thing?" "I forgot. Next time. Next time." The woman was a little incoherent. Eric laughed out loud. "You still want a next time?" The woman recovered and quickly shook her head. I'm sorry. I won't do it again." Eric stepped forward, lifted the woman's chin, and carefully stroked her beautiful face as if he was admiring a delicate porcelain. "In fact, what you did was useless. Even if I don't fulfill my promise and you give the recording to the media, it won't affect me too much. On the contrary, your acting career will be completely over. No movie will use a silly woman." "I didn't want that. I just wanted to protect myself," Nicole weakly defended herself. "I can understand, but I'm still very unhappy. What do you think I should do?" Eric asked. The woman trembled and consciously reached for the buttons of her shirt. Eric stopped her. "Forget it. Looking at you like this, I really can't get excited. Go to bed early. Don't forget what I told you before." After that, Eric threw down the radio and turned to leave the bedroom. Nicole sat in a daze for a long time before she got up and locked the bedroom door. She mechanically took out the bedding from the cabinet and laid it on the bed. She lay there, but couldn't fall asleep. Her thoughts were in a mess. Her life in Australia, her experience in the entertainment industry, the dissuasion of her relatives and friends when she came to Hollywood, her miserable experience in Hollywood for a few months, her several meetings with Eric, and her vision for the future. While she was lost in her thoughts, the sky outside the window began to light up. She looked at her watch. It was 6:30. Although the girl was beginning to feel sleepy, she still forced herself to wake up. She hung the simple clothes in the suitcase in the wardrobe and went to the bathroom to brush her teeth, wash her face, and put on makeup. After tidying herself up, she changed into a white shirt and jeans. She picked a pair of black flats to wear before opening the door and walking out. She didn't know where Eric's bedroom was. Even if she knew, she didn't dare to call him. She quietly walked downstairs, opened the door, and left the villa. The villa with high walls and green trees seemed very quiet. Standing by the empty swimming pool in front of the villa, she took a few deep breaths of the cool morning air. The tiredness from a sleepless night also dissipated a lot. She walked around the villa to familiarize herself with the environment before she walked into the villa again and went to the kitchen. Eric woke up on time at 7:00. After going downstairs, he greeted the tall figure at the kitchen door and went to the gym to start the day's exercise. Half an hour later, Eric took a shower and changed his clothes. He took today's newspaper and sat in the living room until 8:00. Then, he found that the woman seemed to still be busy, so he curiously walked into the kitchen. There were several kinds of food on the kitchen table: sandwiches, sweet soup, steak, salad, and the woman seemed to be making fried eggs. "Nicole, that's enough. We can't finish these." Eric picked up a sandwich and took a bite. The woman turned off the gas, scooped out the fried eggs, and explained, "I don't know what you like to eat, so I made more." I said, "Anything is fine. I'm not picky in this regard." The two brought breakfast to the dining room together. The woman stood hesitantly next to Eric, as if she was very into the role of a maid. Eric couldn't help but laugh. "Sit down and eat together. I don't plan to pay you a salary, so you don't have to be so dedicated." "Okay, thank you." When Nicole heard Eric's words, she obediently sat down on the opposite side of the table. So, this somewhat strange life officially began after this breakfast. After breakfast, Nicole watched Eric drive away before returning to her bedroom. She began to carefully read the documents from last night, especially the actor contract for Sleepless in Seattle. She read it over and over again many times, but she didn't find anything wrong with it. Although Eric told her not to leave the mansion as much as possible to prevent paparazzi from taking photos and causing a scandal, the woman still sneaked out this morning and found a law firm. She spent a few $100s to ask a professional lawyer to help check whether the contract was legally valid. After the lawyer confirmed that there were no problems, she was completely relieved. When Eric returned home in the afternoon, he found that Nicole seemed to be a completely different person. The original uneasiness on her face had completely disappeared, and there was a flattering smile on her face. The villa seemed to have been cleaned and looked brand new. Nicole took a few bags from Eric's hand and asked, "Eric, do you want to put them in your bedroom?" Eric shook his head. "No, these are yours. Go upstairs and pick one for me to see." "For me?" The woman opened a clothing bag and looked inside. She found a set of black and white clothes with beautiful lace. She asked curiously, "Are these pajamas?" "No, you'll know when you change into them in your room." "Oh." The girl nodded her head obediently and went upstairs with several bags in her hands. Eric sat down on the sofa and picked up the remote control to turn on the TV. After waiting for half an hour, he heard the sound of leather boots stepping on the stairs. There seemed to be hesitation in the footsteps. When he turned his head and saw Nicole's figure completely appear, Eric instantly lowered his head and covered his forehead. God, it's so ugly. How could he forget about this? Nicole was a little dissatisfied, so it took her half an hour to persuade herself to change into it. If it was a normal uniform, the woman wouldn't have resisted too much. It wasn't that she hadn't seen it before. However, this set of clothes was very different from the ones she had seen before. She didn't know if it was intentional or not, but this set of clothes was obviously one size smaller. Seeing Eric's action of holding his forehead, the girl's unhappiness inexplicably turned into apprehension. She lowered her head and carefully examined it. Seeing that there was nothing wrong with the way he wore it, she couldn't help but ask, "Eric, is there a problem?" Eric still lowered his head and waved at the woman in disdain. "Go, go, go. Change back first. We'll go out and help you clean up later." Chapter 144. 2 hours later, in a hair salon in Beverly Hills, Nicole looked at her new image in the mirror. Only then did she understand why Eric disliked her. The woman in the mirror was a completely different person from before. If her previous image was that of a woman with some beauty, now she was a glamorous modern woman. In the mirror, the girl's hair had been dyed a beautiful golden brown. Her originally rustic fluffy curly hair had been straightened, and there was a bunch of slanted bangs on her forehead. This hairstyle made the girl look more mature and intellectual. "Miss, compared to your previous hairstyle, this hairstyle makes you look even more classy. Your boyfriend really has good taste." The hairdresser stood behind Nicole and gave her the final touches as she praised her. "He's not." Nicole softly opened her mouth and wanted to defend herself. She glanced at the figure behind her, who was wearing sunglasses and flipping through a magazine in the lounge. She stopped herself. If only he was really her boyfriend. But now, she felt like she was more like a Barbie, allowing that hateful guy to dress her up according to his preferences. So, even though she looked a lot prettier, she wasn't too excited in her heart. "Sir, do you think it's okay?" After everything was done, the woman got up and walked towards Eric. The hairdresser followed behind Nicole. She looked at the somewhat familiar man in sunglasses and asked. Eric raised his head and looked at Nicole. He nodded at the hairdresser. The woman's hairstyle was according to Eric's memory of the hairstyle in the movie Translation Crisis. In his memory, there were many movies about Nicole Kidman, and Eric's favorite was the woman's hairstyle in Translation Crisis. She was intellectual and beautiful, strong and sensitive. In Translation Crisis, after a tragic explosion, the woman played Sylvia. She had a scar on her cheek from shrapnel. She wore a professional suit and walked down the stairs with a backpack. This scene left a deep impression on Eric. If it wasn't for the fact that Nicole's temperament in this scene was very similar to Meg Ryan's when she stood across the road and looked at Tom Hanks in Sleepless in Seattle, Eric wouldn't have given her the female lead role in Sleepless in Seattle. Thinking of Sylvia in Translation Crisis, Eric looked at the woman's left cheek, although there was no scar there. Many classic characters were always deeply engraved in the hearts of viewers. The hairdresser mistook Eric's action for intimacy between lovers. She chuckled and pushed him away. "Eric, what's wrong?" Nicole's woman intuition made her ask. Eric said, "Nothing. But I think—" The woman raised her hand and gestured, but she didn't know how to describe the feeling she just had. "You're right." Eric looked the woman up and down and said, "You could be Nicole Kidman, or Sylvia Bloom, or Grace Stewart, Gillian Owen, Alice Hafford, Ada Monroe, or Virginia Woolf." "I don't understand." The woman shook her head in confusion. "Okay, let's go." Eric didn't explain. He called the waiter over and handed over his credit card. After paying the bill, they left. Nicole wanted to pay the bill herself, but Eric reached out and stopped her. After finding another restaurant for dinner, Eric took the woman back. On the way back, Nicole was silent. When they entered the villa's living room again, the woman whispered, "Eric, do you want me to put it on again and show it to you?" Eric sat down on the sofa and said, "No need. We'll have time in the future. You must have read the contract today, right? Have you made a decision?" Nicole nodded guiltily and ran upstairs to take down the 2 signed contracts. Eric looked at the woman's signature and found a pen to sign as well. He handed one of the contracts to the woman and said, "Prepare the script well." After Eric finished speaking, he didn't chat with the woman for too long and went upstairs to the study. He had to finish the script for Friends. Jeffrey and John Aniston had also suggested forming a screenwriting team to be responsible for writing the script for Friends. Eric only needed to provide the outline of the story. However, Eric didn't accept this suggestion. Although this was a common practice for all television series, Eric decided to write all the scripts for the first season himself in order to ensure the original flavor of the show. After all, no matter how good a screenwriter was, it was impossible to fully understand Eric's intentions. Only Eric, who had all the images in his mind, had the ability to copy them completely. Moreover, Eric also planned to make appropriate changes to the first season based on some classic scenes in his memory to make this season even better. In his memory, the second season of Friends had the best ratings. Other than the occasional guest stars, the most important thing was that the script for the second season was very good. Coincidentally, Eric had watched the complete first 2 seasons, so he made up his mind to completely integrate the content of the 2 seasons and create a brand new Friends that was completely in line with the flavor of his previous life. Anyway, according to the rules of American television series, as long as the first season was successful, the ratings would be guaranteed. He just needed to spend more time on the script. This series was also a very important experiment for Eric and Firefly. If they could make a name for themselves with Friends, then they wouldn't have to worry about not being able to sell other American television series in the future. The market for American television series was actually not much smaller than the movie market, but because the market was very closed, it was very quiet. If they could successfully break into the circle, Eric would be able to convert the classic scenes in his memory into real wealth. The typewriter in the study had been replaced with the latest IBM personal computer. Although the text editing software was still very backward compared to his previous life, and the operation was also quite complicated, it was still much more convenient than a typewriter. Eric also felt like he was in an office in his previous life in front of a laptop. From time to time, the sound of rapid typing on the keyboard could be heard in the study. Every time he wrote a paragraph, Eric would pause and ponder for a while. Combining the content of 2 seasons was not an easy task. Many times, Eric had the impulse to directly copy the first season of the original version. It couldn't be helped. Humans were all lazy. Nicole knocked on the door of the study with a tray in her hand. After getting permission, she walked in and gently placed the coffee pot and coffee cup on the table. When she saw Eric staring at the monitor intently, she started to look around the spacious study. During the day, she wanted to come in and take a look. She didn't have any other intentions, just purely out of curiosity. Unfortunately, this room was not like other rooms that could be opened with a push. Even Drew's bedroom was the same. Nicole even saw a picture of Drew and Eric placed in Drew's room. However, this room was an exception. She guessed that Eric was the only one who had the key to this room. The most eye-catching thing in the study was still the large writing board and the black piano that didn't fit in with the messy style of the study. The writing board was densely covered with A4 papers. Some of them were rough scripts, some were paragraphs of text, some were scattered lines that she couldn't understand at all, and some were written in square characters. Nicole had seen them in Chinatown before. They should be Chinese characters, which was said to be one of the most difficult languages in the world to learn. As if she was inexplicably attracted, the girl walked forward and carefully looked at the manuscripts. She even took a piece of A4 paper with Chinese characters and carefully studied it for a while. Of course, she couldn't understand it, but she could tell that the Chinese characters were handwritten. Although she didn't understand what it meant, it looked very beautiful and had a kind of elegant beauty. Nicole carefully put the A4 paper back on the writing board. She couldn't help but look back at Eric, who was still typing rapidly on the keyboard. This man was really a mystery. It was said that he was less than 19 years old, but he knew so much. Not only was he a director, he was also an actor, a screenwriter, and had published 2 best-selling novels. And in this study, Nicole found that he definitely knew how to draw and play music. He could write those beautiful and mysterious hieroglyphs. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was overflowing with talent. More importantly, he was so rich. It was said that he had a net worth of hundreds of millions of dollars. Women always admired the strong. This was an instinct that was engraved in the depths of their genes during the hundreds of millions of years of evolution. Nicole, who was thinking about all this in her mind, unconsciously fell into a certain mood. Not far away, Eric's every move was becoming more and more pleasing to the eye. If Eric turned his head and saw the girl's expression, based on his experience in his previous life, he would definitely tease her, "Girl, why are you so love-struck?" Unfortunately, he didn't notice any of this. He was so immersed in the idea of the script of Friends that he didn't even take a sip of the coffee that Nicole brought in. The girl silently looked at the back of the working figure for a while. After she came back to her senses, she also noticed that she was acting strangely. Her cheeks unconsciously flushed with a hint of redness. She lifted her feet and walked towards the piano in the corner. Her slender white fingers slid across the black paint. She took a handwritten music score from the piano cover and looked at it. "Don't tell me he wrote this himself?" The girl stared at the strings of small tadpoles. Although she couldn't understand them, she had a very strong feeling. Her fingers unconsciously stroked the black and white piano keys and completely unconsciously pressed them. Ding ding dong dong. A series of crisp sounds in the originally quiet study woke Eric up from his idea of the script. Chapter 145. Why are you still here? Eric turned his head and was surprised to see the flustered girl leaning against the piano. I am sorry, I'll go out now." Nicole carefully put the music score back in place and walked to the door, but Eric stopped her. "Nicole." "Yes." The girl stopped at the door and grabbed the door handle with one hand. She turned around with a questioning look in her eyes. Eric turned around in his office chair and gestured to the entire study. This is not your cleaning area. Although it's a bit messy, I'm used to the placement of a lot of documents. So, do you understand? Yes, I understand. Without your permission, I won't come in. The girl nodded, but she still stopped at the door. She seemed to have some kind of expectation. Eric, is there anything else? Eric shook his head. Nothing. You should rest early. Good night. Good night, Nicole replied. Seeing Eric turn around and focus on the monitor again, she walked out of the study with a slight disappointment and gently closed the door. In the following days, the girl's life seemed very peaceful. Every morning, she would wake up, make breakfast for Eric, send him out, and then spend a few hours cleaning. If it weren't for the clothes on her body constantly reminding her of her identity, the girl would have the illusion that she was a housewife. This feeling was actually not bad. At least, it was not like what the girl had imagined. After Eric dressed her up to look beautiful, he rarely paid attention to her. This time, the girl began to doubt her own feminine charm. Every day, in addition to her own work, she had a lot of free time. When she was bored, she would read the newspaper, watch TV, and repeatedly read the script of Sleepless in Seattle. She also asked Eric to buy her a lot of magazines. She was very obedient and did not sneak out. Since the reality was so much better than she had imagined, she was willing to be a well-behaved canary. She knew that Eric had recently been busy with the post-production of a movie called Dark War, and he was not at home every day. Sometimes, he would spend the night at his girlfriend's house. That girl was really lucky. She had seen Jennifer Aniston's photo and was very envious of that girl's luck. At the end of May, Eric even went to England and left her alone in the villa. It was said that he was there to visit her at work, but he rushed back 2 days later. At the end of May, the girl saw in the newspaper that the North American box office of Home Alone had exceeded $300 million and was officially discontinued. This news occupied the entire newspaper page for the next week. All kinds of comments praised Eric to the skies, and Columbia's stock rose a lot because of this. The focus of the girl's attention was still the news that Eric was about to get as much as $120 million. $120 million was an astronomical figure in Nicole's eyes. The reason why she came to Hollywood was because of the desire for money and fame. She wanted to become a top Hollywood actress like Julia Roberts. However, according to the $6 million salary that Eric had mentioned to her, Julia Roberts would have to shoot 20 movies to earn that much money. Even if a star maintained a high popularity and shot 2 movies a year, it would take 10 years. Moreover, everyone knew that this was impossible. Most stars could only maintain their peak status for about 10 years at most. During these 10 years, the salary would fluctuate according to the movie performance. Thinking of this, the girl's originally calm mind became restless again. If she could become the hostess of this mansion, then she could directly get everything she wanted. The girl even figured out some plans that she thought were feasible. Unfortunately, these little ideas died before they could be implemented. Because the summer vacation was here, and the annoying little minx was back. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The girl happened to be mowing the lawn in the yard when she heard the sound of the door being opened. She knew that Eric usually didn't come back at this time, so she went up to check what was going on. She saw Drew moving the luggage into the yard and closing the door. Nicole greeted him warmly and wanted to help carry the luggage. Building a good relationship with Drew was a very important part of her plan. Unexpectedly, the girl's eyes widened when she saw Nicole's appearance. She had a look of disbelief and undisguised hostility in her eyes. She circled Nicole a few times before asking a question that made Nicole break down. Did he fuck you? Seeing the girl in a daze and in a state of confusion, Drew showed a satisfied and somewhat relaxed expression. No, right? But you can imagine. So pitiful, you didn't even reach A+. You. After being ambushed by Drew, Nicole finally reacted. She shielded her front and blocked Drew's little claws that could reach out again. She couldn't help but retort, yours isn't big either. I'm only 14 years old, ma'am. You're 30 this year, right? I can't be bothered with you, Nicole also noticed Drew's hostility, so she also cut off the idea of building a good relationship with the little girl in front of her. She minded her own business and returned to the lawn to continue mowing the lawn. When Drew heard Eric say that he liked uniforms before, she thought that he was joking. She didn't expect that a tall beauty in uniform would suddenly appear in the villa today. This made her instinctively resist and hostile. She didn't want Eric to have another woman. That little fat girl Jennifer Aniston hadn't even squeezed out yet. If there was another one, how busy would it be when they had to rush out one by one in the future? Hey, you, help me move my luggage in? Although she already knew that Eric had good intentions, Drew didn't think much of it and really treated Nicole as a maid hired by Eric. Sorry, Miss Barrymore. I'm not your servant, so I'm not obligated to do that. The girl coldly continued to move the lawn mower without looking back. The girl was instantly furious. I'll tell Eric that I'll fire you today. Nicole also understood that Drew treated her as a real servant, so she casually threw out a sentence, whatever. Drew angrily stomped her feet and moved the pile of luggage back to the villa one by one. After the few suitcases were all moved, Nicole also finished cleaning the lawn. She returned to the villa and began to prepare dinner. Drew looked at Nicole's back and became angrier. After thinking for a while, she directly picked up the cordless phone and dialed Eric's number. The phone rang a few times before someone picked it up. The girl threw herself on the sofa in the living room and hugged a pillow. Her voice became soft and sweet. Eric, I love you. In the Fox studio, the main scenes of Friends had been set up. Today, they were filming a few scenes that needed to be inserted in Dark War. Eric walked to a quiet corner with a microtack that Motorola had given for the advertisement placement. He was a little confused when he heard Drew's words. Drew, aren't you on holiday today? Are you home? Eric, I love you. The girl's soft voice came from the other end of the phone again. Okay, stop fooling around. If you have something to say, say it. I'm busy, so I'll be home later, Eric said as he clipped the phone to his neck and raised his hand to look at his watch. It's not 5 yet. I'll be home around 6. Eric, I love you. The coquettish voice sounded again. Eric was silent for a moment before saying, Buy it. Tell me what you want. Ugh, Eric, you're so evil. On the sofa in the villa, Drew turned over and put the pillow behind his head. I said I love you so many times, but you didn't give me a single response. If you don't say it, I'll hang up. Eric threatened. Okay. Eric, let's fire that maid, okay? Drew deliberately raised his voice. The girl who was cutting tomatoes in the kitchen heard this and rolled her eyes. You mean Nicole? I didn't hire her. She's just here to help. But I don't like her. Nicole's cooking is pretty good. You'll like it when you try it tonight. Be good and listen to me. I'm hanging up. Eric hung up after saying that. In the villa, Drew waved his little hand angrily and wanted to throw the phone in his hand away. He looked up and saw Nicole leaning against the kitchen door proudly. She was holding a glass bowl and stirring the eggs in it. There was a slightly proud smile on her face. How is it, little guy? You're not allowed to call me little guy. Although Nicole felt a little inferior, she still shrugged indifferently in the face of Drew's provocation. Maybe someone likes this type. He doesn't like it. The girl couldn't help but retort. People's tastes change. Nicole calmly left this sentence and turned to return to the kitchen, leaving the angry Drew behind. Humph, I'll never let you have your way. The girl waved her little fist and swore. On May 24th, with the release of Spielberg's blockbuster Raiders of the Lost Ark, The Last Crusade, the arrival of this year's movie summer season was announced. Although Eric had been busy with the intense post-production work of Dark War, he still paid a lot of attention to this movie. The movie grossed $46 million on more than 2,300 screens in the first week, and the box office dropped between 20% and 30% in the second and third weeks. In the middle of June, the box office of Raiders of the Lost Ark exceeded $100 million in 3 weeks. The post-production work of Dark War was also completed in the middle of June. Although Eric was very generous in many areas, he only used a production budget of $34 million. After all, the finance department of the crew was from Columbia, and the movie did not cost too much money, let alone any special effects. However, after the executives of Columbia saw the finished product of Dark War, they readily agreed to invest the remaining $6 million budget into the promotion of the movie. At the same time, the first summer blockbuster Ghostbusters 2, which Columbia had high hopes for, was also released on 2,400 screens. Chapter 146. Compared to the Raiders of the Lost Ark series, which had a strong box office appeal around the world, the Ghostbusters series did not have any advantages. This was because the genre of the movie was a comedy. It was not easy for comedy movies to accumulate popularity. After all, after everyone laughed and laughed, there was nothing left. Also, there was a gap of 5 years between the two movies in the series. For a comedy, the loss of popularity was even greater. If Columbia could produce other movies to support this important summer release, they would not have started this project. However, Columbia spared no effort in promoting this movie, which made up for most of the disadvantages. Although it was not as crazy as Dark War, compared to other summer blockbusters, Columbia did not plan to make money. They only wanted box office. That was their real goal. The acquisition negotiations with Sony had entered the final stage. The Japanese were determined to be the fat sheep this time. In this case, all of Columbia's operations were aimed at raising the share price. For a listed film company, the box office was the most important factor to influence the share price. Ghostbusters 2 was released on June 16. After the box office for the first week was released, the Columbia executives were ecstatic with the figure of $45 million. Raiders of the Lost Ark 3 only grossed $46 million in the first week. This also meant that Ghostbusters 2 was likely to be like Raiders of the Lost Ark 3. According to the estimates, the North American box office will be close to $200 million. But this excitement only lasted for a week. In the second week, the box office of Ghostbusters 2 plummeted by 55%. The box office for the second week was only about $19 million. The box office evaluation agency quickly lowered the box office estimate for Ghostbusters 2, having the estimated US $200 million box office to US $110 million. Columbia's stock price, which had been rising rapidly, did not fall because of this news, but the rising momentum slowed down. After all, as one of the top 6 summer blockbusters, there was nothing special about a US $100 million box office. The reason for this was that the movie was not as good as the first movie, and more importantly, this movie was unlucky to run into Batman. Batman was first serialized in 1939, and it had been exactly half a century since then. For the first superhero in North American comics history without superpowers, Warner was not very optimistic about starting the series. This was directly reflected in the budget. Compared to the large-scale production budget of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was close to $50 million, Warner only provided $35 million for the production cost of Batman, which was barely on the scale of a blockbuster. It was even less than Ghostbusters and Dark Warfare. Although Dark Warfare only cost $34 million, Columbia provided a budget of $40 million, and Ghostbusters 2 also had a budget of $40 million. Because Warner wasn't optimistic about Batman, Columbia didn't take it seriously either. Therefore, Ghostbusters 2 was released a week before Batman. However, everyone had far underestimated the influence of this superhero that had been serialized for half a century in the hearts of Americans. Batman was released on June 24. A week later, the live-action comic movie swept the box office with an unparalleled momentum of $68 million, accounting for 45% of the total box office for the week, squeezing the box office of many other movies into pieces. The biggest hit was Columbia's Ghostbusters 2. After a 55% drop in the box office, the dream of Ghostbusters 2 of $200 million was completely shattered. After all, after a big drop in the box office, the possibility of a reversal was slim. Therefore, Columbia could only pin its hopes on Eric's Dark Warfare. After all, the movie had been tested internally and by the film critics, and everyone was optimistic about it. However, after the box office for the second week of Batman was released, everyone who was looking forward to Dark Warfare had a dark cloud over their heads. This was because the box office for Batman had only dropped by a weak 23% in the second week, but it still earned $52 million, which was much higher than the box office for the first week of filming for many blockbusters. Although the weekly box office for the summer season would be about $150 million, this $150 million would not seem too much if it was spread over more than 10 movies during the summer season. Those that could get the summer season were either cannon fodder or excellent movies that had high hopes placed on them. The latter proportion was larger. Under such circumstances, Batman alone accounted for 1/3 of the market share. If there was no large drop in the box office next week, the pressure on Dark Battle's box office could be imagined. In the conference room at Columbia's headquarters, a group of senior executives was nervously discussing the response plan. Coca-Cola also sent a vice president to attend the meeting. Eric sat next to Amy Pascal and listened patiently to the discussion. Although he was the director of the movie, Eric didn't have much say in the distribution of the movie. The reason why he was here was only because he was the director of Dark Warfare. Although Columbia had given him full control of the movie production process, he was hardly involved in the distribution. Eric had also submitted a document about his ideas for the movie's publicity, but there was no response from Columbia. I think we should postpone the release of Dark Warfare, at least for a week. Batman is too strong. It's very unwise to stubbornly set the release date on July 7th. We have already lost Ghostbusters 2 because of this. If the box office of Dark Warfare doesn't meet expectations because of Batman, then our previous plan of using 2 blockbusters to push up the stock price will be completely ruined. The executive of the Columbia Publicity Department expressed his opinion. As soon as the other party finished speaking, another executive asked, "Bob, according to your plan, what about the agreements that have been signed with the cinema chains? Coordinate with the other party and compensate the cinema chains appropriately for their losses. We can take out a few movies that have already been produced to temporarily replace them." In short, ensuring the box office of Dark Warfare is the first priority. The manager of the data analysis department interjected, "The box office of Batman has now exceeded 100 million yuan. This momentum is unlikely to continue. Moreover, the critical evaluation of this movie is not very high. I think the box office should show a normal drop of more than 40% in the third week." According to what you said, the movie should show a normal drop in the second week, but the fact is that this did not happen. "There was only a slight drop of 23% in the second week," someone retorted. "The media has already begun to mock our scheduling of the 2 movies. If we don't release them according to the confirmed schedule, it will definitely give people the signal that we have no confidence in the quality of Dark Warfare. This is very dangerous because once the fans have this misunderstanding, they will preemptively think that Dark Warfare is a bad movie. That will be the most fatal blow to the movie. In comparison, releasing it according to the original plan is the safest way. It's not that we don't want to postpone it, but according to the current situation, we absolutely can't postpone it." I also agree with Rue Tay. It's not that we don't want to postpone it, but we can't. Once we postpone it, it's equivalent to telling everyone that we have no confidence in Dark Warfare. We are afraid. Dark Warfare is actually not as good as we advertised. But if Batman shows a slight drop of about 20% in the third week, then it will still get about 40 million yuan in the box office. Can you imagine how much pressure Dark Warfare will have on the box office under such circumstances? Everyone discussed in a hubbub for an hour. The vice president of Coca-Cola who was present had been listening to the whole process. When everyone stopped for a while, he sat up straight and looked at Eric, who had been ignored by everyone and was listening silently like himself. "Mr. Williams, I see that you haven't said anything. Why don't you give your opinion?" Chapter 147. Eric had been flipping through the documents in front of him with his head down, but he was actually a little distracted. He was also thinking about Batman. Although the first Batman was a big success, in his memory, Warner had also begun the long road of the Batman series. In the next 10 years, Warner had produced several sequels to Batman in a row, with an average investment of more than $100 million. However, the box office in North America was only about $100 million. It was estimated that Warner could only break even with the global box office and peripheral sales. For a big production that invested hundreds of millions of dollars, even if it was a small profit, it was actually equivalent to a loss. This was because even if more than $100 million was deposited in the bank, it would still earn a lot of interest in a few years. If it was used on other projects, it might even double. It wasn't until Amy poked his arm gently with a pen that Eric realized that he had become the focus of everyone in the conference room. Many people looked at him with obvious dissatisfaction. Although Columbia had spent a lot of money to snatch the Dark War project from Fox, it didn't mean that Eric would be liked and welcomed by the Columbia executives. In fact, few executives in the entire office liked Eric. Even Amy Pascal, who had always had a good relationship with Eric, had mixed feelings about Eric. All of this was mainly because of Home Alone. After the end of May, the box office of Home Alone had begun to settle. Eric would get about $120 million, which was something everyone in the conference room knew. Columbia could only get about $40 million in profits, and the overseas distribution rights were snatched by Fox for various reasons. Therefore, Eric took most of the profits, which meant that all the executives in the conference room would receive a lot less dividends at the end of the year. In addition, because of the sharing agreement with Dark War, regardless of the box office results, Eric was actually the biggest beneficiary. Eric didn't invest a single cent in this project, but the other party could get a high percentage of the box office. It was only natural that the senior executives would be displeased. Although many shareholders would also benefit from Columbia's stock price being pushed up by Dark War, most of the executives in the conference room didn't have Columbia shares. In this complicated mood, it was not difficult to understand why everyone intentionally or unintentionally ignored Eric's presence in the meeting. Eric had already expected this situation when he didn't get a response to his promotional idea document. Although he had prepared a speech before coming, because of the cold reception he received at the meeting, Eric was too lazy to take the initiative to jump out and make people dislike him. Anyway, according to the original agreement, no matter what the result of the movie was after it was released, he would be the biggest beneficiary. The only difference was how much he earned. For Firefly, who did not invest a single cent, there was no possibility of loss. Originally, Eric was indeed a little worried about the box office prospects of this movie. After all, this was a completely empty new work that didn't exist in Hollywood. But after a series of internal test screenings and critics' test screenings, Eric was relieved. Internal test screenings could basically determine the commercial value of a movie. Although there would sometimes be mistakes, in most cases, the professional filmmakers who had been immersed in Hollywood for decades would not be wrong. The results of the critics' test screenings also indicated the reputation of a movie in the eyes of the fans after it was released. Before the internet era, the reputation of a movie was mainly established through various film reviews in the media. Many fans would only decide whether to watch a movie after reading the film reviews in the newspaper. Now that he had a basic guarantee for both, Eric was no longer worried that this movie would be his Waterloo. As for the unfortunate encounter with Batman, it could only be said that he was unlucky, not guilty of war. Amy Pascal saw the confusion in Eric's eyes when he raised his head, and she had no choice but to lean over and whisper a few words in his ear. "Sorry, everyone, I was a little distracted just now." After Amy's reminder, Eric apologized and continued, "Actually, my proposal for publicity has been sent to the distribution department in Columbia in the form of a document. Maybe it's because I'm a layman in this area, the content of the document didn't appear in the publicity strategy for Dark War." There was a buzz of discussion in the conference room. Most people didn't know that Eric had submitted such a document, and the director of the publicity department was a little guilty. He was promoted by Blunt Cohen. Although Blunt Cohen had left, he had always maintained a good relationship with him. Similarly, because of Blunt Cohen, he didn't have much of a good impression of Eric. After the secretary sent Eric's document, he sneered and threw it aside without even looking at it. He didn't want Eric to intervene in the publicity of Dark War, and he didn't think that Eric could come up with any novel ideas. Faced with everyone's gaze, the director could only stammer and explain, I don't think Mr. Williams' plan. There's nothing unusual about it, so I didn't pay too much attention to it, just, forget it, don't say any more. The current president of Colombia, who was sitting at the head of the table, waved his hand and interrupted the other party's explanation. So many people had already seen that he was lying. If he continued to quibble, he would only become a joke. Eric, since everyone is here, briefly explain your plan. Well, it's like this. Eric stood up and went to the writing board in front of the conference room under the other party's signal. He picked up a black pen and wrote a term on the whiteboard. I call my plan topical marketing. Of course, this is just a more appropriate term that I came up with on the spot. If this concept isn't in the orthodox marketing theory, please don't mind. In his memory, the concept of topical marketing gradually developed and matured after the emergence of online blogs. Before that, although there were some similar marketing practices such as hyping up scandals, Eric didn't know when this concept appeared. The previous publicity for Dark War has already reached the maximum, so we can't make any more efforts in the orthodox publicity method. So, if we want to make a breakthrough, we can only choose a topic that doesn't seem to have much to do with the movie. In fact, I think some movies attract the attention of fans by hyping up scandals between the male and female leads can be classified as topical marketing. After Eric finished speaking, he looked at everyone's reaction and continued, previously, the focus of everyone's debate was whether to delay the release of Dark War by a week. I think my plan can achieve the best of both worlds. The movie doesn't need to be delayed, and if it's done properly, the movie's box office in the second week will have unexpected results. It can make up for the loss caused by the first week's box office being squeezed by Batman to the greatest extent. Under the curious gaze of everyone in the conference room, Eric wrote the words product placement and TV series on the whiteboard. Everyone knows that there are a lot of product placements in Dark War, so there was a small dispute between us. Eric pointed at the product placements and smiled. The executives in the conference room also laughed dryly. Eric had previously received $6 million in advertising fees from the large number of product placements in Dark War. After Colombia learned about the situation, they wanted to get a share of the profits. After all, $6 million was not a small amount of money. It was enough to make a movie. However, Eric converted this advertising fee into his personal income through a specific contract and not the income of Dark War. In the end, Colombia did not get a single cent. After everyone's dry laughter died down, Eric continued, my plan revolves around the product placement and the TV series I'm about to produce. I'm confident that the product placement of these advertisements is very clever, so even the film critics who participated in the test screening did not find anything wrong. Moreover, they did not notice the TV series that appeared 3 times in the movie. Even these film critics did not notice it. I believe that the audience will not notice it. They will be more immersed in the plot of the movie. The topic marketing I'm talking about is that after the movie is released, we will artificially create topics to guide the audience to pay attention to these. If we can successfully arouse the curiosity of the fans about how many advertisements there are in the movie and the content of the TV series that flashes by 3 times, then a large portion of the audience will return or even watch the movie repeatedly in the second week. At this point, an executive in the audience interrupted, Eric, we can try to use the topic of your TV series, but I remember that you specifically told us not to mention anything about product placement during the promotion. Isn't that to prevent the fans from being disgusted? Eric explained, of course, so what I said just now is to reveal these after the movie is released. After the movie is released for 3 days on the first weekend, the reputation of Dark War will be confirmed. I believe that everyone is full of confidence in the movie's reputation. Since the fans have confirmed that this is an excellent movie, then if we reveal it again, the fans will not be disgusted. Instead, they will find it interesting, just like how we are always very tolerant of the flaws of those outstanding talents. No one will criticize Napoleon's height, Einstein's indifference, or Madame Curie's. Ahem, of course, this will still need to be guided by the media. We have to ensure that most of the media's attitude towards this matter is mainly to ridicule and not to criticize. I have already written the specific proposal in the document that I submitted. Of course, it will also need to be revised by professionals. After all, I am just a layman in this field, so there are many things that I might not have considered. After Eric finished speaking, he walked back to his seat. The CEO of Columbia turned his gaze to the executive in charge of the promotion. Ryan, is Eric's document still there? Ryan's hand that was hidden under the conference table rubbed his knee. He said uncertainly, maybe, it's still there. I'll ask my assistant to look for it. Go personally. After you find it, make a few copies and send them over as soon as possible. Okay, I'll go now. The executive stood up and hurriedly left the conference room. The meeting entered a temporary state. Everyone was talking at once about what Eric had just said. Eric was no longer treated coldly. A circle of people gathered around him to discuss with him. Chi Dian. Calm welcomes readers to visit and read our latest, fastest, and hottest serialized works on Chi Dian Originals. Chapter 148. In the end, Columbia decided to take a gamble and release Dark Battle as scheduled. Most executives thought that delaying the movie was riskier than clashing with Batman. Of course, Eric's alternative publicity plan also played a big role. In the Beverly Hills villa, Eric stood in front of the dressing mirror and raised his head slightly. Nicole, who had already changed into casual clothes, bent down and carefully tied his tie for him. Drew, on the other hand, was sprawled on the Simmons without a care for his image. He was wearing a white tank top and a denim skirt, his legs swinging wildly, and his toes with black nail polish were faintly discernible. The girl propped up her chin and looked at Nicole with some jealousy as she helped Eric tie his tie. Although she wanted to do it herself, unfortunately, she didn't know how. Eric, can I walk the red carpet with you later? After the tie was done and Eric put on his suit, Drew asked in a coquettish tone. No, it's all arranged. You and Nicole can go in directly. Well, what if I don't like to be with her? Drew didn't hide her likes and dislikes in front of Nicole. Since the beginning of the summer vacation, Drew seemed to have changed. She no longer wandered around the world and unusually stayed at home every day. After many days, Eric realized that the girl was guarding against Nicole. For example, now, because of the premiere, Eric needed to change clothes and Nicole came to help. So, the girl appeared on time beside them. Hearing Drew's words, Nicole couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. The girl accurately grasped the instantaneous change in the girl's expression. Eric, look, she raised her eyebrows. She's so scheming. Why don't we drive her away? Nicole finally couldn't help but say, Drew, don't I even have the right to express my dissatisfaction when you say that to my face? Don't call me Drew. You should call me Miss Barrymore. Okay, Miss Barrymore. If Eric wasn't here, the girl's tone would have definitely sounded like she was gnashing her teeth. Drew had indeed messed up all her plans. They had been together for more than a month, but there was no substantial progress in her relationship with Eric. Although she always took care of everything in the villa in an orderly manner and took care of Eric's life meticulously, the two of them had almost no time to be alone after Drew's summer vacation. This gave her no chance to take the initiative. She looks so reluctant. She doesn't look like a maid at all. Eric, let's chase her away. Eric put on his suit and knocked on Drew's head with a smile. Stop messing around, or I'll kick you out. Go and change your clothes. The maidservant screamed exaggeratedly in pain. She held her head and walked out reluctantly. When Eric got out of the car, there was already a sea of people in front of the China Grand Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. Apart from reporters, there were also a large number of movie fans on both sides of the red carpet. Eric saw many girls holding up the posters of Dark War high and shouting Cruise's name. He wasn't surprised. Among the several main creators of Dark War, Eric's identity was a director. Although he had gained quite a bit of fame after starring in Back to 17, he had completely given up his career as an actor, and the fame he had gained had slowly dissipated. In addition, His movies didn't have a unified style, and he deliberately kept a low profile. It was impossible for him to accumulate die-hard fans. Hanks didn't have an advantage in terms of looks. Although he was very famous, he could only be classified as a capable actor. Moreover, his acting career was still in the rising stage, and he didn't have the influence that he had in his previous life. Cruise was different. Since his debut 10 years ago, Cruise had been walking the path of an idol. In the eyes of the public, his image was very successful. In his previous life, until his divorce with Nicole Kidman, Cruise's public image had been maintained perfectly. Eric didn't mind the reaction of the movie fans at all. His personal goal was very clear. He never wanted to be a popular idol, but he wanted to be a big hand behind the scenes in Hollywood. The red carpet of the premiere had already begun. From time to time, some small stars would walk on it. According to the usual red carpet rules, the more important people would usually appear in the middle of the red carpet, so Eric didn't walk directly to the red carpet. Instead, he walked to the waiting area. There were already many people gathered there. "Eric, congratulations." After Hanks saw him, he smiled inexplicably and said this. Seeing Eric's somewhat puzzled expression, Hanks explained, "I heard that you got a share of Home Alone, and Pretty Woman officially stopped production a few days ago. The North American box office of $210 million and the global box office of $530 million really shocked a lot of people. In addition to the global box office of Home Alone, your personal accumulated total box office has reached $1 billion. In Hollywood, the number of people whose global box office has exceeded $1 billion can be counted on one hand. Shouldn't you celebrate? This is not too rare." Eric smiled and pointed to Cruise next to him. The global box office of Cruise's movies has long exceeded $1 billion. When Cruise heard Eric's words, he didn't show his usual smug look. He laughed dryly and said modestly, "Eric, how can I compare with you?" It was true that the global box office of the movie he starred in exceeded $1 billion, but compared with the huge box office, the benefits Cruise himself received from it were pitifully small. Up to now, Cruise's personal assets were only tens of millions of US. Eric was expected to get more than $200 million with the two movies Home Alone and Pretty Woman. During this period of time, every time Cruise saw the news about Eric in the newspaper, he couldn't help but be jealous of Eric's luck. At the same time, he was more determined to develop in the direction of a producer. While the shooting of Dark War was completed, the production company set up by Cruise had already begun to select the script. As the female companion arranged by the organizers for Eric today, Brooke Shousey naturally came to his side after Eric appeared. When she heard the conversation between the men, the girl, who had given up after Eric's vague rejection, was tempted again. She looked at Eric with a burning gaze. The unbearable experience from childhood made Brooke Shousey have an unusual worship and obsession with money. If she had enough money back then, she, who had the noble bloodline of the four countries, could really live the life of a noble lady. She wouldn't have to take nude photos for a few $100 when she was 10 years old, she wouldn't have to act in Pretty Baby when she was 12 years old, and she wouldn't have to shoot the Pretty Baby when she was only 10 years old. She wouldn't have to shoot the Pretty Baby when she was 12 years old, and she wouldn't have to shoot that vulgar jeans commercial. When the staff reminded the several main creators that they could walk on the red carpet, Brooke Shousey took the initiative to lean on Eric and affectionately held his arm. At the same time, she regretted wearing high heels today. She was a little taller than Eric, so the two of them didn't look very compatible. Eric didn't care about this. Feeling the girl hugging his arm tightly, he reminded her, "Brooke, you're hugging me too tightly. Can you loosen your grip a little?" "Oh, sorry, Eric, I'm a little nervous," the girl explained and loosened her grip a little. Eric smiled and felt that the girl's thoughts were a little strange. She had grown up in front of the camera since she was a child, so how could she be nervous? However, he was too lazy to dwell on this point and stepped on the red carpet with the girl. Chapter 149. Amidst the cheers of the fans, Eric walked through the crowd and smiled across the fences on both sides of the red carpet as he hurriedly signed a few posters of Back to 17, Home Alone, and Pretty Woman. Then he called Brooke Scholes, who was also signing autographs for the fans, and the two of them went to the media interview area in front of them. Eric, are you confident in the box office of Dark War? Brooke, you and Mr. Williams are so close. Are you two dating? Eric, look here, look here. Mr. Williams, what do you think of the box office trend of Batman? In the crazy flashes of the cameras, Eric hugged Brooke Scholes and smiled as he let the reporters take photos, but he did not intend to answer any questions. Once he opened his mouth, these reporters would definitely ask questions about Dark War and Batman. With the precedent of Ghostbusters 2, Eric's answer would not be appropriate no matter how he answered. If he appeared too confident and the box office did not meet expectations in the future, he would definitely be heavily ridiculed. If he showed a little bit of fear, it would be even more lively. If a director had no confidence in his own work, how could he expect the media to say anything good about it? Even if he answered the questions impartially, it was very likely that the words would be picked out at this moment, so the best strategy was to not respond at all. Hearing the cheers behind him that were louder than when he had just walked through the red carpet, Eric knew that Cruz and Hanks were walking on the red carpet together. This was arranged in advance. He glanced behind him and saw the two smiling as they slowly walked through the crowd of fans. Eric knew that it was time for him to go in and make room for the two superstars. He signaled to Brooke Scholes, and the girl took his arm again, and the two of them walked into the theater together. Outside the roaring crowd of fans, Nicole and Drew had just gotten out of the car and were looking at the situation not far away. Drew was wearing pink-framed heart-shaped sunglasses, chewing gum with his hands in the pockets of his jacket. He looked at the crazy fans, as well as Cruz and Hanks on the red carpet. The lass had picked up this look after watching Kubrick's Lolita. She was convinced that Eric had the soul of a middle-aged man with a Lolita complex. Hence, she decided to dress up and appear in front of Eric. Eric was also tempted by the lass's playful look. Sue Ryan's classic Lolita look paired with the lass's tender face made it impossible for Eric not to be moved. From then on, Drew fell in love with this look because she knew that Eric liked her look. Drew glanced at Nicole, who was standing beside him. Although he didn't like this woman, he still followed Eric's instructions and drove to the scene with her. Seeing the lass look at Cruz and Hanks, who were being chased by the fans, the lass curled her lips in contempt. Hey, do you really want to be like them? Nicole was stunned for a moment before realizing that Drew was talking to her. She was surprised but still replied, "Of course. If not for this, why would I come to Hollywood? Don't you want to be like them? What's there to want? After Sleepless in Seattle is released, you will definitely be chased after like them." Oh. The woman was even more surprised. She lowered her head and looked at the girl beside her. That doesn't sound like something that would come out of your sharp little mouth. I never thought that you would actually praise me. Ha! Drew glanced at the lass contemptuously. Which ear did you hear me praising you? I just have confidence in Eric's script. If any beautiful woman from Hollywood can get the lead role in Eric's script, she can also become a big star. Just like Julia Roberts, she was picked up by Eric from a small restaurant. You are just another lucky woman he picked up. Oh, what about you? The lass's tone was a little sarcastic. The lass didn't mind at all and raised her chin. There was a little pride in her tone. I belong to Eric. Wow. The lass didn't know how to react and could only make a meaningless sound. I belong to Eric. Drew emphasized again. Eric also knows that I belong to him. So, he treats me differently from women like you. Even Jennifer Aniston can't affect my position in his heart. But why does it sound like you are more like? The lass glanced at Drew and wanted to say something, but stopped. Although Drew had been spoiling her little plans recently, she didn't want to completely offend Drew. After all, Drew and Eric had a very close relationship. Drew didn't care and said, "Pet, right? Haha, how funny. I didn't expect you to have the same idea as that stupid girl Jennifer Aniston. Also, even if I am a pet, do you know what you women are?" Although Nicole knew that Drew wouldn't say anything nice, she still couldn't help but reveal a curious expression. Plaything. Drew quickly said, "Do you want to know why I asked that question when we first met? Because if the answer is yes, then Eric might have some feelings for you and you might become his lover. But if the answer is no, then it means that Eric doesn't like you at all. He only treats you as a plaything, a beautifully dressed doll. He dressed you up and put you in the villa just because he thought it was fun." Nicole's face became a little ugly. Her lips trembled as she retorted, "That's impossible. It's definitely not like that. He gave me the female lead role in a movie." "Humph, it's just a female lead role in a movie. You think too much. Don't think that I don't know what you're thinking. You've been trying to seduce him all this time. You want to be William's wife, right? That's ridiculous." The woman suddenly raised her head and glared fiercely at Drew. "I understand. You want to use these words to force me to leave. Little girl, don't even think about it. If what you said is true, why did you try so hard to stop me all this time?" Drew shrugged. "I just don't want to make things difficult for Eric. Some of his ideas are a little different from others. If you really do climb up his ladder, and you're such a scheming woman, it won't be easy for him to get rid of you in the future. So, before you leave my house, I'll keep a close eye on you. Nicole Kidman, you'd better give up early." "Let's wait and see, Miss Barrymore," the woman said sarcastically and walked to the entrance of the theater. Drew adjusted his sunglasses and followed them. After Cruz and Hanks left the red carpet, another celebrity guest walked up. Drew couldn't help but chatter beside Nicole, "Look at those female celebrities who made the fans scream even louder." In fact, as long as Eric was willing, he just had to beckon them a little, and most of them would be more than happy to jump on him. So, although these actresses got more screams than Eric just now, in fact, people like Eric are the real controllers of Hollywood. Although Nicole pretended to be annoyed and didn't care about Drew's words, she had to admit that what the little girl said was true. Just for a role, she was willing to go to Eric's house and change into a sexy uniform to please him. With Eric's status accumulated by the success of several consecutive movies, there were not many actresses who wanted to climb up the ladder in Hollywood who would refuse some of Eric's requests. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.